Chapter 790. Alright, you're from the Panwu heavenly raiment and have the profoundness of the microscopic world integrated into it. Let's call it the Panway sword. In that instant, the Panway sword burst out with sword light, completely integrating into the celestial eradication sword formation. Then, with the power of the divine sword, the prowess of the celestial eradication sword formation increased once again. This time around, it was not just the energies of physical particles and ether particles that were being drawn out. The power of the sword formation entered deep into the physical particles, drawing out the powers of the even finer particles. As the prowess of the celestial eradication sword formation increased, the countenance of true Lord Qingshan, who was in the sky, changed abruptly. Under his astonished gaze, the sword's shadow in the sky emitted a bright glow and started to push up the chaotic air currents. Ah! Amidst his fury, true Lord Qingshan activated his powers fiercely. Chaotic air currents kept on exploding, and crackling sounds of explosions rang out incessantly in the space. However, it was useless. He could only watch as the sword's shadow pressed down bit by bit. How is this possible? It's impossible. The duality minute formation should be invincible among those below Tier 5 of the divine level. The duality minute formation's limit of interference toward the microscopic world for those below Tier 5 of the divine level is the duality minute formation. How can it possibly fail? How can it possibly fail? Could it be that I can't even go up against a small portion of Fang Xinjian's powers? Panic gradually appeared in true Lord Qingshan's eyes. This was a situation he had never encountered before. As the sword's shadow pressed closer and closer, the chaotic air currents in the sky started to collapse, and the huge fist showed signs of collapsing. Unlike true Lord Qingshan's side, Alexander's side had the upper hand. Faced with Fang Xinjian, who only had 20% of his powers, Alexander felt no pressure at all. Adam's shroud, which hit its target with every attack, wrapped up Fang Xinjian entirely. Golden flames started burning fiercely on the shroud. It was Saint Adam's remnant powers. Endless powers were activated, unleashing destructive powers at the microscopic level toward Fang Xinjian. Alexander, who had activated Adam's shroud, could clearly sense that in the first instant, all the air and physical particles in the space within Adam's shroud had been shattered. In that instant, it was as if over 100 nuclear missiles had exploded simultaneously within the space that was not even 1 cubic meter. Terrifying powers seethed to and fro, attempting to tear Fang Xinjian's body apart. But this was not enough, far from enough. Alexander sneered and raised both of his hands up high, transforming them into a huge black millstone. He unleashed his full strength and smashed it towards Fang Xinjian, who was covered by Adam's shroud. This time around, the destructive prowess of the full-powered overturned hell reached deep into the microscopic world. This was the pinnacle attack of a Tier 5 divine-level expert. Everywhere it passed, apart from time itself, everything seemed to be shattered into pieces. Alexander, who had unleashed this attack, could not help but feel emotional. His overturned hell was truly the peak of his entire life. The destructive prowess of this attack directly affected the microscopic world, and it could cause irreparable damage to any material matter. Even Fang Xinjian, who was wrapped in Adam's shroud, would be severely injured. The Black Mage King is right. Previously, I wasn't able to unleash the true powers of a Tier 5 divine-level expert. In fact, the fact that I was able to create a divine country shows my ability to interfere with the material world. From the Black Mage King, Alexander gained a deeper understanding of the destructive prowess of a divine-level expert. Only by evolving from the great destruction of a wide area to the destructive prowess of spatial distortions, and then to the destructive prowess of the microscopic world, could one be considered to have reached a higher level. For those below Tier 5 of the divine level to be able to use their own powers to interfere with the microscopic world, this is the pinnacle of destructive prowess. In order to progress further and truly be able to directly control and freely control the powers of the microscopic world, one would need to have a cultivation of at least Tier 5 of the divine level. This means that this attack of mine, excluding divine arts, black magic, and other abilities, is already the limit of my current destructive prowess. It's a punch at the pinnacle. It's a pity that I won't be able to fight against Fang Xinjian in his best condition. At this moment, Alexander suddenly felt a sense of regret. He had reached the pinnacle, but he did not have the chance to wipe away his humiliation and fight against Fang Xinjian in his best condition. To this sovereign who had dominated the empire for over 30 years, this brought him an endless sense of regret. It was because at this moment, he felt that even if he were to fight against Fang Xinjian alone, he would still have a chance to win. It's a pity that after this battle, you no longer have the right to challenge me. The three divine-level experts, the Lanshan Moonlight, the Astral Ancestor, and Lan Yu, finally reacted to the battle between Fang Xinjian and Alexander, who was moving at close to light speed. Seeing that Alexander was being suppressed, the countenances of Fang Xinjian changed. However, each of them still performed their ultimate moves, relying on the senses of their martial wills to attack Alexander's position. However, Alexander paid no heed to the attacks from the three of them. To him, their attacks were just like the bites of bugs. Right now, all of his attention was placed on Fang Xinjian, immersed in the regret of not being able to fight against Fang Xinjian in his best condition. As the feelings of regret rose in his heart, Alexander's attacks became even more vicious. His fists turned into a lump of pitch-black darkness that kept on twisting and spinning. It was as if countless agonizing cries and furious bellows could be heard ringing out from it, as if countless vengeful spirits were howling from within. The overturned hell, which was activated at full power, took effect in that space that was not even 1 cubic meter in size, surrounding and suppressing Fang Xinjian, who was in the microscopic world. To Alexander, who had unleashed his full power, this was his way of expressing his regret. The more regretful he was, the more vicious his attacks would be. If I were to kill you today, I'll feel regret. But if I don't kill you today, I'll only feel even more regret. In the northern ice region, the fifth prince finally struck out the third attack of his three worlds eradication. Amidst the world-annihilating aura, his fist, which contained a terrifying power, landed lightly on Fang Xinjian's chest. In almost an instant, Fang Xinjian's entire chest was shattered from this attack, and his clone, which only had 5% of his powers, suffered from serious injuries after these three attacks. Sensing that the God of Universal Truth's powers on his body had completely dissipated, the fifth prince stopped his attack. He clenched his right hand into a fist and placed it by his waist. He stood 100 meters away from Fang Xinjian, staring at Fang Xinjian as he continued to scheme in his heart. Although the fifth prince had dealt serious injuries to Fang Xinjian's clone, he had also depleted the God of Universal Truth's powers for 3 attacks. He still had to make a judgment on what would happen next. As long as he recovers slightly, I'll retreat immediately. After all, there are others who are still pestering him. But if he doesn't recover... The fifth prince still understood how to take advantage of his opponent's weakness to take his life. Therefore, under Jacob's astonished gaze, Fang Xinjian and the fifth prince suddenly appeared. Then Fang Xinjian, who had always been undefeatable, suffered from serious injuries from 3 punches. Even his conjured physique, which was covered in cracks, showed no signs of recovering. How could this be? He could not understand how the fifth prince had suddenly won against Fang Xinjian. Then the fifth prince punched out across space. It was the tyrant fist that he had created himself. The fist force and sword intense collided in midair and then dissipated. It took 3 streams of all-conquering sword intense to shatter the fifth prince's probing punch. At the sight of this scene, the corners of the fifth prince's lips curled up into a savage smile. Chapter 791. Streams of sword light kept on flashing to and fro before Audrey, fending off the first prince's fist force. Due to Audrey being behind him, Fang Xinjian was unable to perform the light pursuit or the infiltrating void sword technique. He could only keep on performing the all-conquering sword to fight against the first prince. It was a pity that his clone, which only had 5% of his powers, appeared to be in pieces after receiving 3 attacks from the 3 worlds' eradication. His entire body was filled with light spots that kept on shattering and dissipating. With a maniacal laugh, he struck out another punch. He did not perform the martial arts of the ancient path of hell, but used his own powers to propel the 3 worlds' eradication. His entire fist seemed to have turned into nothingness, a fist force that was similar to the prodigious demolition sword but many times more terrifying than the prodigious demolition sword struck out, wanting to shatter all matter in its path. Right now, without the God of Universal Truth's powers to propel the 3 worlds' eradication, the first prince's realm was unable to affect the microscopic world. However, despite this, Fang Xinjian did not perform the light pursuit sword, allowing his body to turn into light to dodge the first prince's attack. It was because if he were to dodge, the person behind him would die. Just like in the other 3 battlefields, each of the first prince's punches struck out toward Audrey. It was only Fang Xinjian who was blocking them. Violent fist force gushed out toward Fang Xinjian, and countless sword lights were on the verge of collapsing under his fist force. Can't even withstand a single blow. Bang 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 bang. Amidst explosive sounds, the sword lights were shattered, and the first prince's fist smashed onto Fang Xinjian's head. The violent fist force brought along a destructive aura, and Fang Xinjian's entire body undulated as countless cracks appeared. The first prince had been waiting for this feeling of having the upper hand and being unable to retaliate against Fang Xinjian. Fang Xinjian. Another punch smashed out, colliding fiercely against Fang Xinjian's chest, creating a depression. "If you don't die today!" Rumbling sounds rang out as if a myriad of thunderstorms were ringing out from the fist force, smashing fiercely onto Fang Xinjian's body, once again depleting the power of his martial will in his body. "My heart is uneasy." Another punch shattered the sword intent and landed on Fang Xinjian's stomach. Seeing that Fang Xinjian's martial will was being depleted rapidly, the first prince broke into a proud smile. "Your existence itself is a mistake. Since this world already has me, it doesn't need you anymore." In the blink of an eye, the sky full of black light had already enveloped Audrey and Fang Xinjian. An unrivaled destructive aura descended from the sky, and the first prince's entire body burned with black flames. It was the martial will that he had transformed in order to cultivate the 3 worlds' eradication. Right now, the first prince had changed from his original domineering will and ambition to control everything to a disposition of destroying all living things and shattering the 3 realms. Just the aftermath of this attack alone was enough to turn the entire Sun City into dust. At the center of the attack, there was only darkness. Even light was completely absorbed by the distortion of space. This was the limit of a microscopic attack that could distort space. It was also the first prince's current pinnacle attack. In the sky above the imperial capital, outside the purple light pillar, the chaos which was still aware of the situation of the 4 battlefields. It was because her sisters were watching each of the battlefield. True Lord Qinshan was at a disadvantage, but before that happened, the 3 members of the Krieg royal family would all deal Fang Xinjian with serious injuries. Coupled with the 2 guardian kings in the formation, even if Fang Xinjian did not die, he would have to recuperate for at least 3 months or even half a year. It would be sufficient for the chaos which to get everything back on track. As for whether true Lord Qinshan, Alexander, the first prince, the 5th prince, and the others were killed by Fang Xinjian, it was none of her business. In fact, if the chaos which really wanted to kill Fang Xinjian, she would only need to contact the Black Mage King and the Red Mage King to replace the 2 princes. It was a pity that she did not plan on killing Fang Xinjian. Moreover, the two mage kings clearly had other plans as well. They had their own plans for the evil god summoning ritual, and it was impossible for them to listen to the Chaos Witch's arrangements. However, just as the situation was going well and everything was developing according to her expectations, the Purple Mage King appeared before her. Claudia. The Chaos Witch Lamia looked at the Purple Mage King and appeared directly. She asked in a gentle voice, "What are you trying to do?" The Purple Mage King broke into an extremely charming smile, looked at the Chaos Witch and said, "Lamia, since you want to deal with Fang Xinjian so much, of course I'll have to help you." The Chaos Witch Lamia's countenance was a little grim as she looked at Claudia and said, "Claudia, think through your actions. Are you going to interfere with the world's operations, go back on the gods' agreement and destroy the entire world?" The Purple Mage King Claudia smiled. She looked at the Chaos Witch like she was looking at a clown, and the more she smiled, the happier she became. Finally, the Chaos Witch could not take it anymore and said, "What's so funny? Everything we do concerns the past and future of the entire world. Don't you understand your responsibility?" The Purple Mage King Claudia let out a cold laugh. "The entire world? Stop joking, Lamia. You think too highly of yourself. Compared to the evil god, compared to the god of universal truth, and compared to the countless great existences in the multivariate universe, we're not even a speck of dust. Everything was decided at the beginning of the game. What you're doing is just lying to yourself." She then raised her palm, and there was a little purple light sphere floating in her palm. Anyone who saw the existence of this light sphere, especially this purple light sphere, would feel a numbing feeling. It was a sour, sweet, longing and warm feeling. "Love is the greatest power in the world," the Purple Mage King Claudia said with a sigh. The Purple Mage King Claudia sighed softly and said, "Other than the most ancient gods, all intelligent life forms are unable to break free from their existence. Parents, children, lovers, countries, society, tribes, and even oneself. Everything is formed by love and linked by love." Looking at that purple light sphere, the Chaos Witch's countenance changed drastically. "This is 5,000,000 sets of love." The Purple Mage King laughed crazily. "You lunatic," the Chaos Witch said with a grim countenance, "stop this quickly. You have no idea what you're doing." Even ordinary people would probably be able to see the panic in her eyes. The Purple Mage King smiled soundlessly and said, "Of course I know. It's for the sake of the person I love." With that, she slapped out a palm toward Lilia. The purple ball of light was still in his palm, and he slapped it toward Lilia. Right now, Lilia appeared to be in a daze. Her eyes were lifeless, and her body was stiff. It was as if she did not know what was going to happen next. Simultaneously, a stream of sword light cut across the sky, almost instantly blocking before Lilia. At the sight of this scene, the Chaos Witch let out an enraged bellow, "No!" Chapter 792. Within the imperial capital, which was encompassed by the ritual, in a small world that had broken away from the timeline. Battles and killings did not stop for even a moment. A conferred knight was walking on the twisted street. Suddenly, he stopped in his tracks and revealed a puzzled gaze as he looked at the buildings that had been pieced together. "This is..." However, before he could react, a black shadow had already descended from the sky. It was the Black Mage King, who had his mouth wide open. Right now, the Black Mage King's face was filled with black aura, and his eyes were filled with a greedy green light. Just like that, the Black Mage King's mouth descended from the sky and instantly swallowed that conferred knight. Before this conferred knight could even react, he was completely digested by the Black Mage King. The Black Mage King patted his tummy and revealed a satisfied smile as he sensed the increasing power in his body. "My martial will has increased to 3,500 points. Fang Xinjian's martial will had already surpassed that of ordinary Tier 4 or 5 divine level expert. However, it was only at 2,000 points. It was already sufficient for him to overturn rivers and seas and kill Tier 4 divine level experts with ease. Right now, the Black Mage King, who had continued to engulf and improve himself, had already increased his martial will to 3,500 points. Even the Black Mage King himself did not know how terrifying his powers would be if he were to unleash them at full power. It was because there was too much food in the ritual. It's been a long time since I've eaten so much. Right now, not only were there a large number of divine-level experts and demigods who had rushed over from within the Empire's borders, but there were also divine-level experts that Shang had left behind in the imperial capital. Such a rich variety of food made the Black Mage King extremely excited, especially the sumptuous meal. At the thought of this, the Black Mage King turned his head and looked toward the center of the imperial capital. His eyes revealed an extremely excited expression. At the next moment, 6 figures descended abruptly, surrounding the Black Mage King. Looking at the 6 people who had suddenly appeared, the Black Mage King smiled. "Everyone, what's the matter?" Black Mage King, a strong man who was completely black and had a bald head, walked out. He looked at the Black Mage King with an unfriendly expression and said, "You 8 guy?" The 6 people before him were 6 of the 8 divine-level experts that Shang had left behind in the imperial capital. As for the other 2, Maruto, who was at Tier 3 of the divine level, had been captured by Fang Xinjian and then brought to the Great Western region. The other person, who was called Kai, had been eaten up by the Black Mage King. The burly, dark-skinned man who was speaking now was called Crowley. He was from the same era as the Church's Holy Maiden Luoyuo 3,000 years ago. He was one of the strongest people in the continent at that time, and he was one of the 10 divine generals of the Diamond Dynasty. He was also the strongest expert, a Tier 3 divine level knight, that Shang had left behind in the Empire this time around aside from Maruto. However, right now, Crowley, who was one of the 10 divine generals of the Diamond Dynasty 3,000 years ago, was as pleasant as food before the Black Mage King. Cole stared at the Black Mage King and said, "Are you going to make an enemy out of Shang?" The Black Mage King patted his tummy, smiled, and said, "Then I won't stand on ceremony." After eating up these 6 divine-level experts, he would be one step closer to his goal. The silhouettes kept flashing, shuttling back and forth between the spatial rift. That was the School of Sword Art's Supreme Chief, performing his Astral Obscurity Sword. This unparalleled killing technique, which was created from the School of Sword Art's Supreme Manual, the Galaxy Creation Sword Manual, had once been very famous in the hands of the Supreme Chief and was considered to be one of the strongest sword techniques in the Empire. Fang Xinjian had also learned this sword technique in the past. He had even used this sword technique to shuttle through spatial rifts and defeat many powerful enemies. He had then combined the essence of countless sword arts into the foundation of this sword technique, creating the world-shocking infiltrating void sword. Right now, the Supreme Chief had reached Tier 2 of the divine level, and the prowess of the Astral Obscurity sword in his hands was even greater. He shuttled freely between spatial rifts, changing his size, appearing and disappearing at will. He could be as big as a mountain peak, or as small as a physical particle. However, he continued to flee incessantly. A hint of panic would occasionally flash in his eyes. It was because he understood very well how terrifying the monster chasing after him was. With a soft kacha sound, a stream of red light flashed in the air, and the Supreme Chief, Heng Tianxiao, was squeezed out from the spatial rift. Then he was sent flying out like a rubber ball, smashing through the houses and streets that were over 3,000 meters away, leaving behind a large area of ruins. His entire body was shattered, and streams of light spots dissipated rapidly from his body. With just that single attack, he felt that his martial will and conjured physique were on the verge of breaking down. It was as if his body would completely dissipate at any moment. "With just one strike, he killed me?" The corners of Heng Tianxiao's lips curled up into a hint of a bitter smile. It was true that these mages were much stronger than knights of the same level. Walking through the ruins, the Red Mage King looked at Hing Tianxiao in the distance, and revealed a hint of boredom. He had already lost interest in this prey. However, halfway through, he suddenly stopped and looked at the things under the ruins, leaving behind a curious expression. Under the exposed ruins, a large number of commoners were exposed. Each of them seemed to be dead. They were either lying down, sprawled on the ground, or sitting there. As the houses on the streets were destroyed, these people were thrown out like bugs. However, they still seemed to be dead. They were tossed into the sky, plunged to the ground, buried, discarded, dismembered, or scorched. These commoners, who were either really dead or seemed to be dead, had their heads wrapped up by a purple bug. The Red Mage King squatted down and reached out his hand to grab the bug that was covering the face of a commoner. As he pulled fiercely, the sound of cloth being torn rang out, and countless tentacles were pulled out from the person's head and face. Clearly, not only had these bugs covered the person's head, but they had also inserted their tentacles into the person's head. After the bug was removed, the Red Mage King was unable to sense any brainwaves from the commoner's brain, even though his physical characteristics were that of a living person. The Red Mage King grabbed out of curiosity and tore off the commoner's arm. However, the commoner still did not show any signs of waking up. It was as if he had turned into a vegetable. What the hell is this? Looking at the jellyfish-like purple bug in his hand, the Red Mage King gave it some thought and then bit down on it. Then he spat it out. It tastes too horrible. It's like feces that have been air-dried for 10 years. Shaking his head, the Red Mage King soon lost interest in the bugs and commoners under his feet. He turned his head and continued to walk toward the School of Sword Art's Supreme Chief, who was seriously injured. Right now, over 5 million people in the imperial capital were buried under the Red Mage King's feet. Each of their heads was covered by a similar bug, and all of them lay under the ruins as if they had turned into people in a vegetative state. It was as if they had lost their souls. Chapter 793. At the sight of this scene, the Chaos Witch let out an enraged bellow. However, the Chaos Witch, who was unable to be touched, attacked, or come into contact with or attack others, had no means to stop this scene from happening. Almost at the instant the Purple Mage King slapped out her palm toward Lilia, Fang Xinjian instantly sensed the danger through his sudden inspiration as they had returned to this universe and timeline from the ritual. Without any hesitation or thinking, Fang Xinjian split up another 10% of his powers from True Lord Qingshan's battlefield. His body turned into a light sword and arrived in the imperial capital at light speed, blocking before Lilia. Looking at the sword light that was coming toward her, the Purple Mage King Claudia revealed an excited smile, unlike the chaos which Lamia's fury. The light sphere in her palm was what she called 5 million sets of love. She had spent a tremendous amount of effort to create it. Making use of the opportunity of setting up the ritual, the Purple Mage King sent all of her powers and the bugs under her to encompass the entire imperial capital. A total of 5 million people in the imperial capital were also buried underground by her. Everyone had their brains parasitized by her bugs, and then she sent out the same message to all the commoners. That was to fall in love with Lilia. Everyone's minds were filled up and covered by Lilia's information. All sorts of Lilia's images, voice, and disposition filled up their minds, and then turned into endless love under the effects of black magic. All the details were filled up by that dreamlike feeling, and everyone's love was distorted by the Purple Mage King. It could be said that while the ritual was being carried out, she also took the opportunity to make the 5 million people in the imperial capital, regardless of their age, gender, elderly, middle-aged women, middle-aged men, or 5-year-old children, fall in love with Lilia to varying degrees. However, this was just the beginning. Thereafter, she once again borrowed the powers of the bugs and black magic to draw out the wills of all 5 million people. The love of 5 million people was held in her hands. This was her true goal. It could be said that anyone who was hit by these 5 million sets of love would fall hopelessly in love with Lilia if they were to be channeled into their minds. However, this was also a double-edged sword. After suffering the impact of 5 million sets of consciousness, those below the divine level would definitely die. Even those above the divine level might be seriously injured. Therefore, when she slammed these 5 million sets of love toward Lilia, Fang Xinjian sensed danger. He sensed that Lilia would die from this attack, and so he instantly split up 10% of his powers to block in front of Lilia. This was also the Purple Mage King's goal, to channel 5 million sets of love into Fang Xinjian. Of love, therefore, under the Chaos Witch's furious gaze, the Purple Mage King's smile, and Fang Xinjian's astonished gaze, the purple light sphere gushed into Fang Xinjian's brain, entering deep into his consciousness. It was as if oil had been poured into a boiling pot. At this moment, Fang Xinjian felt as if his entire brain was going to explode, and countless pieces of information seemed to be exploding in his brain. With 5 million consciousnesses gushing in, even with Fang Xinjian's current cultivation, he was stunned. Idiot! At the sight of this scene, the Chaos Witch knew that the situation had completely gone out of control. She shook her head, looked at the Purple Mage King with a mocking expression, and said, "Do you think that you've given him feelings? Isn't that the case?" The Purple Mage King Claudia looked at the dazed Fang Xinjian with satisfaction. Looking at the purple light that kept on flashing in his eyes, she broke into a satisfied smile as if she had seen a perfect piece of art. Feelings. The Chaos Witch King smiled. Nothing has ever been taken away from him. He's just been sealed. Sealed. The Purple Mage King frowned and asked puzzledly, "Why is it a seal?" The Chaos Witch King shook her head and slowly dissipated into the air. "You'll never know what kind of demon you've released." At the next moment, she disappeared from the Purple Mage King's sight, leaping toward the north of the land. The entire situation in the Empire has completely gone out of control. Fang Xinjian has been released from his restraints, and there's probably no one in the Empire who can stop him. At the thought of this, Lamia's eyes revealed a grim expression. "Now that things have come to this, I can only place all of my powers on the Steel Lion Kingdom and the Church. I hope that nothing goes wrong in the north." After the Chaos Witch King left, the Purple Mage King started to feel puzzled. The Chaos Witch King's earlier words kept on lingering in Claudia's mind. She looked at Fang Xinjian, and her purple martial will kept on scanning him. It was as if she had entered deep into Fang Xinjian's inner world, observing the changes in the information in his mind. Right now, Fang Xinjian's mind was drowned by countless voices. Lilia, 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 Lilia. Countless voices were calling out the same name, and the love of 5 million people was squeezed into Fang Xinjian's mind. However, in reality, they were unable to resonate with him. The intense love did not distort Fang Xinjian's consciousness and grant him feelings. Instead, it called out something deep in Fang Xinjian's heart that he had thought did not exist. Kacha. There seemed to be a shattering sound ringing out in his mind. Lilia. I love Lilia. She's so cute. She's so pure. Countless voices were shouting out in Fang Xinjian's mind. Fang Xinjian was like a bystander, watching everything and even frowning slightly. Kacha Kacha. The shattering sound in his mind grew increasingly louder. There seemed to be something exploding in the depths of his heart. Where is Lilia? We must find her. Where are we? Where is this place? Fervent emotions were like strong alcohol, erupting in an instant. However, after the eruption, it brought about countless uncertainties and questions. Looking at these, Fang Xinjian felt even more perplexed, and more cracks flashed in his heart. Kacha, Kacha Kacha. At the next moment, something seemed to shatter abruptly. In the sky above the imperial capital, Fang Xinjian opened his eyes and looked at the world before him. Everything seemed to be the same, but he knew that everything was different. Looking at the abnormality in Fang Xinjian's heart, countless pieces of information flashed in the Purple Mage King's mind. In this world, there are indeed people who can ignore, or rather, not be affected by, a part of their emotions. They are cold-blooded, emotionless, selfish, and absolutely rational. Or perhaps it can be said that they are born to be heartless. Could it be that this Fang Xinjian is such a person? The Purple Mage King's marshal will kept scanning through Fang Xinjian's heart, unwilling to let go of any tiny bit of justification in his heart. Suddenly, her countenance changed, and with a flash, she retreated at light speed. 5 million sets of love didn't grant and distort his emotions. Instead, it activated something in his body. To think that it's like this. It's not a deprivation but a seal. Since that's the case, I'll need to observe him carefully before making a decision. Chapter 794. Seeing that the Purple Mage King was retreating, Fang Xinjian did not stop her. He merely turned around and slashed out. A stream of purple light flashed, as if he had slashed something off from Lilia's body. With this slash from Fang Xinjian, Lilia's eyes regained clarity in that instant, and she put out her hand. Master! However, she realized that her body was descending uncontrollably. She could only watch as Fang Xinjian moved further and further away from her. Fang Xinjian did not look at her. When he confirmed that Lilia would land outside the imperial capital and had left safely, he could no longer hold it in. When the feelings he had lost for 3 years had returned to his body. When he learned about the current situation of the battle, the first feeling he felt was anger, indignation, and boundless anger burning in his heart. At this moment, he had a strong urge to kill. It was not because someone had killed his subordinates that he wanted to take revenge. It was because he wanted to kill after understanding this logic. Rather, at this moment, there was only one thought in his heart: killing. With a flash of light, this 10% of power returned to the Great Western region, once again fending off true Lord Qingshan's attack. In the northern ice region, the 5th Prince's eyes were filled with excitement as he watched Fang Xinjian, who was at a disadvantage and had no way to retaliate. How long had he waited? How much price had he paid? How many times had he failed? This time around, he was finally able to crush Fang Xinjian, who was a thorn in his side, completely as if he was crushing an ant. However, at the next moment, the 5th Prince discovered that Fang Xinjian had suddenly disappeared. At the same time that Fang Xinjian disappeared, a message was transmitted into the 5th Prince's mind by Fang Xinjian. 5 seconds. Before I leave, you have a total of 5 seconds to think about your last words. In that instant, Fang Xinjian disappeared completely, and the 5th Prince's fist force struck out toward Jacob, who was behind Fang Xinjian. Jacob's countenance changed, and he attacked with the Holy Light clan's myriad Holy Light, clashing fiercely against the 5th Prince's 3 worlds eradication. However, before the 3 worlds eradication, the Holy Light clan's ultimate technique was like a mantis trying to stop a chariot. The 5th Prince's punch completely shattered Jacob's martial will, almost instantly turning it into dust. Countless specks of light shattered in midair. They were like fireflies trying to gather together with great difficulty. However, after crushing Jacob's martial will with a single punch and almost causing him to be on the brink of death, the pride on the 5th Prince's face turned into panic. Fang Xinjian! Come out! If you don't come out, I'll beat him to death. Recalling Fang Xinjian's earlier words, the panic on the 5th Prince's face grew increasingly intense. He punched out once again, and Fang Xinjian's distorted martial will in midair was once again shattered. Fang Xinjian completely dissipated into nothingness. The top expert among the 7 great clans, the head of the Holy Light clan, and Jacob, who had been subdued by Fang Xinjian in the past, had finally died in the hands of the 5th Prince. However, the 5th Prince was not satisfied at all. His face was filled with panic, and in the blink of an eye, he turned into a long stream of light, disappearing into the horizon. Right now, there was only one sentence in his heart. Flee. Flee as far as you can. It was because he understood clearly that when Fang Xinjian started to go against the rules he had set himself, when he started to not care about the lives of his subordinates or anyone else, such a Fang Xinjian would be very terrifying. The first prince looked at the shattered Fang Xinjian and finally stopped his attacks, laughing out loud. In his opinion, the current Fang Xinjian was no longer able to put up any resistance before him. He looked at Fang Xinjian and said, "Fang Xinjian, I've always admired your talent. However, you shouldn't have made an enemy out of the entire Krieg royal family. This is the greatest mistake you've made in your life. Our clan has established the empire for 200 years. It's not something that you can covet." The more the first prince spoke, the more exhilarated he felt. How long had he been dreaming of Fang Xinjian groveling before him and being beaten up by him until he could not even withstand a single blow? Right now, this dream had finally come true. As expected, I'm the only one who is fated to be the one. Only I can lead the entire empire. I'm the most outstanding successor to the Krieg royal family. However, at the next moment, a stream of sword light cut across the sky, interrupting the first prince's thoughts. Fang Xinjian, who had left the fifth prince, came before the first prince. The two gushes of 5% of his powers merged into one, and his battle prowess instantly increased by several times. After all, even though his powers had increased by 2 times, his battle prowess was not as simple as increasing by 2 times. It was like how one person could punch out 50 kilograms while the other could punch out 100 kilograms. The difference in their battle prowess was more than just 2 times. The first prince looked in the direction where the sword light had come from and his countenance changed. He stopped his attacks and thought, "What's going on? Did the others fail?" However, he was not sure how much battle prowess Fang Xinjian had. Fang Xinjian merely looked at the first prince. Countless emotions and memories suddenly flowed out from his heart, and the entire world seemed to have become livelier. Among them, the most intense was the rage in his heart. In the past, I didn't have any emotions. Therefore, I only acted according to the way I acted as a human. Sensing the fury in his chest, Fang Xinjian had never felt as alive as he was today. At this moment, he suddenly realized that he did not need a reason or a motive. He could do anything and kill anyone. It was as if there was nothing in the entire world that could stop him from making a decision. Fang Xinjian looked at the first prince and asked, "Aren't you going to escape?" The first prince's face was distorted, and he gritted his teeth. In his fury, he continued to punch out. The 3 worlds' eradication turned into a stream of black light and charged out toward Fang Xinjian. Under the first prince's propulsion, even without the God of Universal Truth's reinforcement, this great martial technique had already reached an extreme in terms of destructive prowess. Unless one entered deep into the microscopic world, there were no longer any attacks that could remain intact under this attack. However, with a flash of sword light, the first prince's entire arm was slashed off. "Ah!" A crazed, furious bellow rang out from the first prince's martial will, and he punched out again. Black light burst out, encompassing both Fang Xinjian and Audrey. However, after the black light dissipated, only the first prince's other arm was slashed off. It turned into light fragments and dissipated into the air. Why? Looking at the undefeatable Fang Xinjian, the first prince finally revealed an expression of despair and regret. It was only when Fang Xinjian could truly display his abilities that the first prince realized that he was already so weak that he could not even withstand a single blow. Unknowingly, the distance between the first prince and Fang Xinjian was like the distance between the clouds and the mud. Has the distance between us already reached such an extent? At the thought of this, the first prince suddenly felt extremely regretful. He regretted that he had not killed Fang Xinjian back then. He regretted that he had not gone all out to win Fang Xinjian over. Ah! Performing his final despairing attack, the first prince leaped up abruptly and headbutted fiercely toward Fang Xinjian. Boom! Their heads collided, but the first prince's head instantly turned into dust. His entire body gradually cracked, turning into a myriad of light spots that slowly dissipated in midair. Looking at the myriad of light fragments, Fang Xinjian disappeared once again. He turned into a stream of sword light, leaving behind a long light belt in the sky. He instantly traversed a distance of several thousand kilometers and arrived in Xingwu region. Chapter 795. In the full moon shrine in the Xingwu continent, Fang Xinjian, who had 20% of his powers, was wrapped up by Alexander. Alexander attacked Fang Xinjian like he was hitting a sandbag. Overturned hell, mortal world reversal. Alexander performed many unrivaled techniques from the ancient path of hell, causing Fang Xinjian, who was wrapped up in Adam's shroud, to not make a single sound. It was as if he was dead. At the side, the astral ancestor, blue sacred moonlight, and Lan Yu all attacked Alexander. However, the strongest amongst them, the astral ancestor, was only at tier 2 of the divine level. How could he possibly be a match for Alexander? Various illusions of stars and moons shot out one after another, flattening the surrounding area within a radius of 1,000 meters. However, when the attacks from the three of them landed on Alexander's body, they were like pebbles sinking into the ocean. There was no change at all. The astral ancestor's countenance was extremely grim. Their attacks were completely useless against Alexander, and Fang Xinjian was completely suppressed by Alexander. There was no hope for him to retaliate at all. At this moment, Alexander's unrivaled ferocious prowess, which had dominated the empire for several decades, once again gushed into the trio's hearts. The blue sacred moonlight was the first to stop. Her blue eyes were filled with terror. This won't do. Our attacks are completely ineffective. In her heart, she could not help but feel hesitant. Could it be that even Fang Xinjian isn't a match for him this time around? The astral ancestor also stopped and looked at Alexander, who was in the distance. The strange light in his eyes flickered. This is bad. This time around, Alexander has used Adam's shroud. Adam's shroud? Hearing this name, the blue sacred moonlight jumped in fright. This is the ancient path of hell's greatest treasure. Legend has it that unless the Empire's survival is at stake, it mustn't be used lightly. Adam's shroud was a great divine equipment. It was an existence that was even more famous than Alexander's. 200 years ago, when the Empire had been unified, it had been the nightmare of countless factions and influences. Even the current blue sacred moonlight and the astral ancestor had grown up listening to legendary stories about it. This was especially so 20 years ago when the Serene Shrine, which was controlled by the gray-robed mages, had fought against the various influences in the Empire. It was also during that time that Alexander had brought out this ancient path of hell's ultimate treasure. That year, everyone once again experienced the horror from 200 years ago. Adam's shroud once again became a nightmare that no one wanted to face. However, Lan Yu had never experienced that era. When she heard the conversation between the two of them, she immediately asked, "Is it that powerful? What was the use of Adam's shroud?" Alexander was clearly on par with Xinjian previously. How is it that he is able to suppress Xinjian completely this time around? Whether they were willing or not, the three of them had to admit that Alexander had completely suppressed Fang Xinjian. In fact, it was even possible for him to completely suppress Fang Xinjian. The blue sacred moonlight said coldly, "An attack will hit, and an attack will be completed. All of Adam's shroud's attacks don't require time. This means that when faced with this divine equipment, the only thing you can do is to clash head-on. Moreover, you'll have to use your entire body to clash head-on with the opponent's strongest point." The astral ancestor's countenance was also extremely grim. The current situation shows that Xinjian is still not a match for Alexander in a head-on clash. Thinking of this, he sighed. After all, Alexander has a strong foundation and countless legacies. He's also a Tier 5 divine level expert. It's only natural that he's stronger than Xinjiang in terms of strength. Moreover, now that Adam's shroud has already sealed Xinjiang, it'll be a battle of pure strength. Xinjiang is at a great disadvantage. Hearing the astral ancestor's explanation, the worry on Lan Yu's face grew even stronger. Just then, Alexander performed another mortal world reversal at the microscopic level. Countless microscopic particles spun in the opposite direction between his palms, and an aura of destruction and creation, as well as an unrivaled prowess, was emitted. The three of them scanned it with their martial wills, only to discover that even when their martial wills entered it, they were instantly wiped out. They were unable to understand the changes in that palm attack. They had never heard of or seen such means before. As if sensing the trio's astonishment, Alexander spoke to them for the first time since the start of the battle. Divine-level martial prowess, other than the ability to overturn rivers and seas at the start, distort space at the end, and then control the microscopic space. As he said this, the terrifying aura in his palms continued to expand. Countless light spots and heat energy undulated, as if the entire world was about to explode between his palms. This mortal world reversal at the microscopic level was Alexander's full power. He had a feeling that under this attack, Fang Xinjiang would definitely die. This was a realm that his father and grandfather had never come into contact with before. This was the true profoundness of the mortal world reversal. Not only did it distort space, but it also distorted the microscopic particles in space, changing the world's foundation. Right now, the prowess of this attack of Alexander's was already close to that of true Lord Qingshan's duality minute formation's chaotic air currents. It was just that the quantity was far inferior. There had never been a moment when Alexander had felt so powerful. He even had an urge to stop immediately and give Fang Xinjiang time to recover. He would then defeat Fang Xinjiang in his prime fair and square, letting Fang Xinjiang know that he, Alexander, was definitely not any weaker than Fang Xinjiang. However, it was just an impulse. Thankfully, there were still 3 spectators, so he would not be unable to vent the pride in his heart. The foundation of everything in the world comes from the microscopic world. The true profoundness of this mortal world reversal is to shake the microscopic world, and from there, shake the entire human world. It's a pity that even though I've comprehended the supreme profoundness of this move, Fang Xinjiang, you're going to die. There will be one less opponent in the world who can take on this move of mine. At the next moment, the terrifying aura in Alexander's palms came crashing down, striking Adam's shroud. It was transmitted to Fang Xinjiang's body through Adam's shroud. The entire Adam's shroud started to tremble like never before, as if it had reached some kind of limit that it could bear. What was even more terrifying was that within several tens of meters around Alexander, bits of terrifying aura gushed out, wiping out the land within a range of several tens of meters completely. It was not an explosion or shattering. Instead, it had completely disappeared. Seeing the pieces of land suddenly disappear, turning into invisible energy and dissipating into the world, the 3 people present were all astonished. The tremors that were encompassed by Adam's shroud became increasingly slower, as if everything inside was gradually turning into nothingness. Alexander said calmly, "Although the 3 of you submitted to Fang Xinjiang in the past, the Empire is in need of manpower now. From today onward, you'll be part of the Night Association. If you strive to redeem yourself with meritorious deeds, you'll be spared from the death penalty." Looking at the changes to Adam's shroud, Lan Yu shouted in her consciousness, "Quickly use the formation." However, despite hearing her shout, the blue sacred moonlight did not say anything. Instead, her expression was gloomy, making it hard to tell what she was thinking. Lan Yu looked at the blue sacred moonlight in disbelief and shouted, "Grandmaster." The blue sacred moonlight sent a voice transmission through her martial will, "Lan Yu, if Alexander wins, What will happen to our full moon shrine? Chapter 796. Therefore, all the more we mustn't let him win. Lan Yu said furiously, Grandmaster, hurry up and activate our sacred shrine's formation. We must at least slow it down and buy time for Xinjiang. That way we'll still have a chance. But he's already going to lose, the blue sacred moonlight said with a sigh. It's true that Fang Xinjiang is an outstanding talent of his generation, but right now, Alexander's skills are clearly a notch higher. Lan Yu, I know that you're interested in Fang Xinjiang, but at a time like this, we should consider the bigger picture. The 3,600 people in the full moon shrine, as well as several hundred years of legacies, are all on our shoulders. They mustn't end in my hands. If we were to make another move now, you should know the outcome. Hearing this, Lan Yu wanted to rebut but was unable to say a word. In a world like Miracle World, the difference in strength between individuals had reached an overwhelming level. In order to survive, the influences and experts here had long since learned to respect the will of the strong and follow in the footsteps of the stronger ones. Therefore, Lan Yu knew that there was no problem with the blue sacred moonlight lowering her head to Alexander. It was just like how they had lowered their heads to Fang Xinjiang back then. It was just that they had changed from one expert to another. Since Alexander had already spoken up to warn them, the outcome if they were to make another move was self-evident. However, at the thought of this, Lan Yu's eyes still revealed a hint of reluctance. The blue sacred moonlight patted Lan Yu's shoulder, as if consoling her. On the battlefield, Alexander did not care about what the three of them were thinking. To him, it would be fine if the three of them knew how to adapt to the circumstances. But if they did not, then they would be useless and there was no need for him to take them in. Just when everyone thought that the outcome of the battle had been decided, a beam of sword light flashed across the sky, bringing with it a long path of light as it cut across the sky. Finally, it shot directly toward Adam's shroud, entering it, and eventually dissipating. At the sight of this scene, Alexander's pupils contracted slightly. This is... At this moment, an extremely bad premonition suddenly rose in his heart. It was a sense of danger brought about by the sudden inspiration. 10% of Fang Xinjiang's powers had rushed to the Xingwu region and instantly penetrated through Adam's shroud with his light pursuit sword technique, merging with 20% of his powers. His strength increased rapidly, and his combat prowess continued to rise. The current Fang Xinjiang that Alessandra was facing was only 50% stronger than before. However, his combat prowess had increased by more than a few times. At the next moment, amidst Alexander's astonishment and the blue sacred moonlights, Lan Yu's, and the astral ancestors' disbelieving gazes, a stream of sword light darted out from Adam's shroud. Then a stream of cross-shaped sword light flashed, and a huge wound was torn out from Adam's shroud. Fang Xinjiang held the light sword in his hand and walked out in void space. His conjured physique was still covered in cracks, but it did not affect his current aura in the slightest. The shattered Adam's shroud and the light sword condensed from his martial will added 30% more power to him. The sword will soared into the sky and rushed toward Alessandra. Alexander, if you survive a sword attack from me today, I'll spare your entire Krieg royal family. Sensing the information contained in the will, Alessandra's heart was filled with rage. He had just comprehended the supreme realm of the ancient path of hell, so how could he be scared off by Fang Xinjiang? He even felt exhilarated from being able to defeat Fang Xinjiang head-on. Arrogant lad! The shattered Adam's shroud in the surroundings instantly trembled and then wrapped up Fang Xinjiang once again. Alessandra raised his palms, and the martial will throughout his body continued to shatter. The blue sacred moonlight said in astonishment in her consciousness, "Who's entering hell? This is the ancient path of hell's method of burning the will and stimulating the power. Alessandra is going all out." Lan Yu's brows were also furrowed tightly, and hints of worry flashed in her eyes. The astral ancestor also kept a close eye on the battlefield. It was because the outcome of this battle would directly affect their future. Would Alessandra win in the end? Or would Fang Xinjian be more skilled? The strength of both sides had already surpassed their understanding, causing them to be confused. Endless terrifying auras extended out from Alessandra's palms, and his martial will was burning. The prowess of the mortal world reversal that erupted from this attack far surpassed ordinary ones. The mortal world reversal turned into a terrifying air current, and wherever it passed by, everything in the world would be annihilated. It struck Adam's shroud, and at the instant the Atom's shroud transmitted this destructive force, countless cracks appeared on it. Even the entire space started to tremble intensely, showing signs of instability. The supreme profoundness of the mortal world reversal was to shake the microscopic world and then affect the macroscopic world, reversing the foundations of the entire world. Alessandra's attack once again surpassed his previous pinnacle, reaching a brand new realm. It even started to show signs of shaking and changing the microscopic world. This was a power that surpassed the ability to unleash one's powers into the microscopic world. It was a power that only those at Tier 6 of the divine level and above could comprehend. At this moment, a hint of comprehension flashed in Alessandra's heart. If I were to strive for Tier 6 of the divine level now, I'd probably have 70% confidence. However, at the next moment, an intense sense of danger gushed out in his heart. Amidst Adam's shroud, Fang Xinjian tapped out with a finger, and powerful heavenly thunders and terrestrial magnetism forces extended out from his finger. The all-conquering sword intent was activated at full power, piercing out in Alessandra's direction. Take this. Alessandra's mortal world reversal started to affect the powers of the microscopic world. However, Fang Xinjian had long since comprehended a hint of the nature of electromagnetic forces, strong force and weak force. Although he was unable to directly control the microscopic world and could only use his own powers to affect the microscopic world, the two of them were incomparable in terms of their comprehension of the microscopic world. At this moment, a stream of sword light seemed to slash through everything before Alessandra. Adam's shroud was slashed apart once again, and the terrifying aura condensed by the mortal world reversal was slashed apart. The sword light slashed through Alessandra's head and darted into the depths of his consciousness. Along the way, countless memories were stirred up and countless martial wills shattered. In the end, the sword light shot out from the back of Alessandra's head, shooting out diagonally toward the sky like a meteor. It soared up into the sky and even pierced through the atmospheric layer, landing in the 9-tiered heavens, and then dissipated without a trace. At this second, countless people on the land could see a stream of white light soar into the sky. They looked at the light that cut through the sky above the land and revealed astonished expressions. After this sword attack, Alessandra looked at this scene in a daze before Fang Xinjian. His body started to shatter and split up incessantly, turning into countless light spots and dissipating. However, he did not care about these. Instead, he looked at Fang Xinjian and sighed. Is this your full-powered sword attack at your peak? Am I the last opponent you have to rush over? Under this sword attack, his conjured physique had completely collapsed. Alessandra knew that he was doomed with this conjured physique. At this moment, he only wanted to know how much power Fang Xinjian had used and how much of a difference there was between them. Throwing a glance at Alessandra, Fang Xinjian said calmly, 30% of my power. Hearing Fang Xinjian's reply, Alessandra let out a bitter laugh, and his conjured physique dissipated completely, leaving behind only a sigh on the spot. There's such a big difference? At the next moment, sword light cut across the sky, and Fang Xinjian left, leaving behind Lan Yu, the blue sacred moonlight, and the astral ancestor who were all dumbfounded. Chapter 797. Lan Yu's eyes were filled with admiration as she watched Fang Xinjian disappear. Killing Alexander with a single sword strike, how terrifying was this? How powerful was this? How shocking was this? How invincible was this? It was not just Lan Yu. The minds of the blue sacred moonlight and the astral ancestor were also filled with Fang Xinjian's earlier sword attack. That sword attack which had pierced through the sky and slashed through the atmosphere was far too astonishing. Just by observing from the side, they had the misconception that their wills had been pierced. It was as if there was nothing in the entire world that could fend off that sword attack. The three of them looked in the direction in which Fang Xinjian had disappeared, remaining silent. It was as if they were still immersed in the astonishment brought about by Fang Xinjian's sword attack. Fang Xinjian was already rushing in the direction of the Great Western region. From the moment he dealt with the first prince to the moment he killed Alexander, he had only spent 2.5 seconds. After all, both of them were divine-level experts. Even if they were to communicate, it would only take an instant for them to cross 1,000 lis. Within these 2.5 seconds, Fang Xinjian had scared off the fifth prince, defeated the first prince, and killed Alexander. He had fought across 1,000 lis with a single sword attack, turning the entire situation around. However, Alexander had really died, while the first prince and the fifth prince had left behind their clones. However, after sensing the locations of their clones with his sudden inspiration, Fang Xinjian broke into a cold smile. Is there any use in leaving behind clones? Both the first prince and the fifth prince had split up about 10% of their powers to ensure their survival. However, in comparison, Alexander not leaving behind any clones was the wisest choice. On one hand, it was to ensure that he would be able to go all out in battle. On the other hand, it also showed his confidence in himself. Only when he was determined to win would he not leave behind any clones and go all out. The fact that the first prince and the fifth prince had left behind 10% of their powers was a sign of their lack of confidence in themselves. It was because they were not like Fang Xinjian, who had left behind clones in order to obtain complete victory. Instead, they had left behind clones in order to escape. Moreover, Fang Xinjian had attained Tier 4 of the divine level and possessed the sudden inspiration ability. As long as his clone was still in this world, Fang Xinjian would definitely be able to find it. However, right now, Fang Xinjian was not in a hurry to look for them. Right now, neither the first prince nor the fifth prince were of any concern to him. Right now, he had to settle the battle in the Great Western region. After spending 2 seconds to deal with True Lord Qingshan, it was more than enough for Fang Xinjian to return and kill the two princes. Over at the Great Western region, True Lord Qingshan had been extremely exasperated. It was because he realized that his duality minute formation was not a match for Fang Xinjian's sword formation. However, he was, after all, an expert who had been famous for a long time in the past. His panic only lasted for a moment before he regained his senses. Fang Xinjian, do you really think you've won? True Lord Qingshan broke into a cold smile, and a stream of martial will swept out in all directions. Luoluo, Alba, the two of you can come out as well. With True Lord Qingshan's orders, Shang's two divine-level experts finally appeared. Two gushes of martial will, one white and one green, soared into the sky. The clouds in the sky seethed, and under the influence of the two people's astonishing powers, it was as if the entire Great Western City was welcoming a series of Grade 10 typhoons. There were even a few small buildings that were uprooted by the martial will, flying into the sky and eventually turning into dust. These two people were Grand Duke Alba and Saint Luoluo. Right now, Grand Duke Alba was dressed in a black tuxedo, standing in midair like an aristocratic gentleman. This Jade Dynasty's top scholar from 5,000 years ago clearly possessed the strength of a Tier 4 divine-level expert. His aura was overwhelming, and he was like a god or a demon. On the other side was Saint Luoluo, who was completely covered in a white veil, and her face was shrouded in fog. This Saint Luoluo was the saint of the Holy Sea of Truth from 3,000 years ago. The so-called saint was chosen from countless women by the Holy See of Truth. They had to go through many strict checks. Not only did they have to have a pure faith and bloodline, but they also had to have great talent and be intelligent. After they were chosen to be the saint, they would go through 10 to 20 years of nurturing before eventually becoming the Pope's personal maid. Although they were known as personal maids, no one would look down on them. It was because they were the Pope's personal maids, and many of the Pope's orders were carried out by them personally. Their authority was even greater than that of the guardian kings. Right now, Saint Luoluo had clearly recovered her cultivation to that of a Tier 4 divine-level expert. However, it was a pity that she was unable to bring back the divine arts that the God of universal truth had bestowed upon her in her previous life. Despite this, with the countless secret martial arts that she had grasped from the Holy See of Truth, she was still able to look down on 99% of the experts in the world. Seeing the two of them appear, the countenances of everyone in the Great Western Region Regional Academy changed. Regardless of whether it was Tyrant, the fourth prince, or Philip, all of their eyes were filled with worry. They had been considering whether they should lend a hand when Fang Xinjian was being suppressed by true Lord Qingshan. After all, the battle prowess displayed by the two of them was far too terrifying, and their participation might end up becoming a burden for Fang Xinjian. Seeing that Fang Xinjian had turned the situation around, everyone felt at ease. However, they had not expected that true Lord Qingshan would bring two great experts with him. True Lord Qingshan looked at Fang Xinjian, who did not seem to care, and his will seethed as he continued to smile coldly. Fang Xinjian, don't think that you can look down on ordinary divine-level experts just because you have this sword formation. Do you think that since I've brought them here, I haven't made any preparations? Attack! At the next moment, a myriad of chaotic air currents gushed out from Saint Luoluo and Grand Duke Alba. In that instant, the three duality minute formations in the sky shone, and the number of chaotic air currents increased at a terrifying rate. True Lord Qingshan had imparted his great arts to Saint Luoluo and Grand Duke Alba. The duo's duality minute formation appeared to be very crude, and the prowess of the duality minute formation that they had activated was not even comparable to that of true Lord Qingshan's duality minute formation. However, the duo's sudden attacks were sufficient to break the previous situation. The three duality minute formations shone with each other, and their prowess increased by several times. Chaotic air currents came gushing out in all directions, as if wanting to cover up the entire sky of the Great Western Region. However, most of the power was pressed onto Fang Xinjian. Loud kacha-kacha sounds rang out from Fang Xinjian's sword shadows. It was as if Mount Tai had collapsed and Mount Everest had been broken. True Lord Qingshan laughed maniacally and said, "Feel despair, Fang Xinjian." Seeing the sword shadows that Fang Xinjian had condensed shattering and the chaotic air currents pressing down like a waterfall, the countenances of everyone in the Great Western Region changed. "Run! We can't hold them off anymore! Save us!" In an instant, everyone in the academy broke down. Countless knights and conferred knights fled in all directions, attempting to escape from the danger of the sky collapsing. The countenances of Prince Philip and the others also changed drastically, revealing expressions of despair as they looked at the impasse in the sky. It was because they knew that once Fang Xinjian failed, they would not be able to escape from the other party's attack. "Let's make our move," Tyrant said with a grim countenance. "If we attack together, we might have a chance. Moreover, we can't let Xinjian do everything." Prince Philip nodded. Although their powers were far from being comparable to the duality minute formation, it was impossible for them to sit still and wait for death at a moment of life and death like this. "The three of us will join forces and attack toward one point. Whether we live or die will depend on this." The fourth prince's expression was also solemn, and streams of sword shadows rose up slowly behind him. Chapter 798. Three streams of light soared into the sky, shooting out towards St. Luoluo at the same time. In the scan of Tyrant and the other two's martial wills, St. Luoluo was clearly the weakest amongst the three of them. After all, after St. Luoluo had reincarnated, she was no longer able to use divine art. On the other hand, Grand Duke Alba was still able to perform most of the martial arts he had when he was still alive. His abilities were not much weaker than when he had been alive. Despite this, the two of them had grasped a portion of the profoundness of the duality minute formation, and their battle prowess had improved tremendously. "I'll go first." Amidst the sudden eruption of grey light, Tyrant's entire body suddenly swelled up. It was not the expansion of his martial will but his actual body. Tyrant's conjured physique was expanding rapidly. Countless flesh and blood seethed inside and outside his body, and countless mouths opened up on his expanding body. These mouths crazily engulfed all the energy in the surroundings, be it air, light, heat, electromagnetic waves, radiation, or anything else. They engulfed them and then continued to multiply. In the blink of an eye, Tyrant had turned into a giant with a height of over 10,000 meters. The power waves on his body were like the sea and the abyss, and it was as if every inch of his skin and every cell was unleashing a reaction that could be compared to a nuclear explosion. 1 month ago, Fang Xinjian had given Tyrant Bu's flesh, which was summoned by the World Annihilation Heavenly Lord. During this 1 month, not only had Tyrant integrated Bu's flesh into his body, but he had also made use of this to achieve continuous breakthroughs, reaching Tier 3 of the divine level. Right now, when he unleashed his full power, he immediately displayed an overwhelming aura. This was especially when he sensed that the engulfment and annihilation intents in Bu's flesh were similar to the concepts he had comprehended from the grey evil god. This allowed him to achieve a breakthrough in his martial art. Instantly turning into a 10,000-meter tall giant, Tyrant punched out, and a massive grey phantom image flashed behind him. It was an extremely large monster land that lay across the universe's void space. It seemed to expand along with the expansion of the entire universe. The entire land seemed to be a living being, like a huge beast that was supporting the entire universe's life. As he punched out, all the mouths on Tyrant's body let out blood-curdling screams. He roared crazily, and his entire body was like a colossal beast capable of destroying the world as he charged toward the St. Luoluo in the sky. On the other side, the fourth prince also made his move. The 7 great sword techniques that had been passed down in the Jade dynasty were unleashed concurrently. These 7 sword techniques were the general principles of the Jade dynasty's founder, the mystic Abyss Heavenly Emperor. It contained the supreme secret of the Jade dynasty's swordsmanship. However, that was not all. As the fourth prince made his move, waves of demonic power burst out from his body. Also 1 month ago, Fang Xinjian had given the Atom's blood that he had taken from the first prince to the fourth prince. After that, the fourth prince used Atom's blood to perform the blood transfusion art on himself, completely cleansing his body and giving it a new lease on life. He merged his will and his physical body into one. Although his cultivation had only risen to Tier 2 of the divine level, he possessed the conjured physique of a Tier 3 divine level expert in advance. Right now, he was unleashing his full power, and the blood throughout his body seethed. A figure that was completely black, as if the entire night sky was draped over his body, appeared behind him. 7 streams of sword shadows flashed up and down in the night sky, seething to and fro. This was the fourth prince's self-created Hell's 7 swords, a martial technique that he had combined Atom's blood, the Jade dynasty's 7 great sword techniques, and the power of the 9th level of the mystical prince. Pain, bitterness, hunger, crying, misery, evil, death. The 7 swords struck out at the same time, containing 7 types of emotions. They attacked the other party's inner heart, shaking up the other party's will, confusing the other party's emotions, and even causing the effect of the other party's will collapsing. This was another unrivaled sword technique that could be passed down through the generations. With one move of 7 swords, the fourth prince's powers were mixed in with Tyron's attacks and shot out toward the Saint Luoluo. On Prince Philip's side, he had turned into a bright sun, and the universal truth longsword behind him had achieved a new breakthrough. With the help of the 9th level of the mystical prince, this believer of the holy sea of truth had improved further. Not only had his cultivation reached Tier 3 of the divine level, but his universal truth longsword had also improved further. With a single thrust, he could split up yin and yang, sealing up all physical particles within a range of several thousand meters and breaking down any physical structure. Right now, he had turned into a bright sun, encompassing toward Saint Luoluo. It was as if he wanted to use the universal truth longsword to completely seal and disintegrate Saint Luoluo. The 3 divine-level experts made their moves instantly. In almost 1,000th of a second, it was already a world-shaking and astonishing night. However, at the sight of the 3 of them, Saint Luoluo smiled coldly in her heart. Do you think that I'm a pushover? It's a pity that you guys have no idea what kind of power I've grasped. She waved her hand, and vigorous chaotic air currents gushed out, bringing along an aura that could cause the heavens to collapse and the earth to sink. There was no need for any technique. She used the most violent and barbaric method to charge out toward the 3 of them. It was like a seething landslide, wanting to drown everything. Rumble! The chaotic air currents collided against Tyron's 10,000-meter tall body like a tsunami. They instantly drowned Tyron, and his physical body was being destroyed and exploded at a rapid speed. To think that a mere gray-robed person dares to fight against me. Saint Luoluo let out a cold laugh, and the chaotic air currents passed by Tyron's body and struck the bright sun that Prince Philip had turned into. You dare to perform the universal truth sword technique before me? Today, I'll let you see what the real universal truth sword technique is. The chaotic air currents gushed forth, instantly shattering the myriad of sword light in the sky. Then, with a gush of the air currents, they turned into a long sword with chaotic colors that encompassed Prince Philip. Each stream of air currents performed the universal truth longsword's sword technique, breaking down and sealing Prince Philip's conjured physique bit by bit. Saint Luoluo's universal truth longsword was at a realm above that of Prince Philip's. Moreover, as she had used the powers of the duality minute formation to propel her sword technique, its prowess was even more astonishing. Grand Duke Alba also made a move. This lad is performing our Jade Dynasty's sword technique. Leave it to me. After saying that, he tapped out with a finger. It was the sword form of the 6 heaven-soaring swords. The sword pierced through the sky, clashing against the 4th prince's 7 sword shadows with the momentum of a comet piercing through the sun. In that instant, the sword light and sword shadows were all shattered. The 4th prince only felt a heart-piercing pain from his will, and his martial will showed signs of leaving his body. You've only learned the surface of the Jade Dynasty's sword technique, and yet you're thinking of creating your own sword technique? You're really ignorant and fearless. In the blink of an eye, the attacks of the 3 divine-level experts from the Great Western region were broken down one by one. Even their own lives were in danger. Under the pressure of the chaotic air currents from the duality minute formation, the sword shadows that Feng Xinjian had condensed kept on shattering. The chaotic air currents brought about by the formation kept on pressing down, and they were now only over 300 meters away from the ground. The pressure, which was as if the sky was collapsing, stimulated everyone in the academy and the great western city crazily. Many tall buildings started to collapse, and the strong gales brought about by the air currents caused many city walls to collapse. Large trees were uprooted from the ground. The endless chaotic air currents seemed to want to encompass the entire sky. One could not see the end of the chaotic air current. It was as if the entire sky had collapsed, and there was nowhere for one to escape to. Chapter 799. Everyone on the ground looked at the scene in the sky with despair in their eyes. Some people fled frantically, some fell to the ground, and most of them just raised their heads and looked toward the sky with lifeless eyes. It's useless. There's no way to escape. Even Xinjiang isn't a match for him? He's too strong. He has such power that makes one feel despair. Damn it, I don't wish to die yet. Xinjiang, surrender. That's right, surrender. Seeing that he had gained the upper hand, true Lord Qingshan also felt that victory was within his grasp. Looking at Fang Xinjiang, who was under the sword shadows, he shouted out in his consciousness, Fang Xinjiang, are you still going to fight to the death? It's impossible for you to win. If you continue to resist, you and all of your subordinates will eventually be crushed into dust by me. Are you still going to be stubborn? Under the sword shadows, Fang Xinjiang merely looked at true Lord Qingshan coldly. Suddenly, his gaze turned toward the horizon. It's finally settled. In the short period of time when the Great Western region was in a desperate situation, Fang Xinjiang had already completed the battle between the first prince and Alexander. He turned into a stream of sword light and pierced into the sky above the Great Western region. Almost at the instant he arrived in the Great Western region, he had already clashed into layers of chaotic air current. The power of these chaotic air currents took effect directly on the microscopic world. Even when performing the light pursuit sword technique, Fang Xinjiang was unable to disregard them. Only the infiltrating void sword intense that he had slashed out could make use of space transmission to disregard them. However, his body was unable to do so. However, with the reinforcement from the light pursuit sword technique, Fang Xinjiang made a rapid turn and skimmed across the low sky. All physical matter before him was like layers of illusions, pierced through by Fang Xinjiang. He instantly arrived in the sky above the Great Western Region Academy and merged with Fang Xinjiang, who had 20% of his powers. In that instant, his battle prowess increased by multiple times. Seeing a stream of sword light cutting across the sky and merging with Fang Xinjiang, true Lord Qingshan's eyelids twitched fiercely. A bunch of trash. In the next moment, his palms pressed down fiercely, once again sending the chaotic air currents crashing down. He wanted to kill Fang Xinjiang in a single blow. Unfortunately, it was too late. Fang Xinjiang's two streams of power blended together in an instant. 50% of the power was enough to activate more of the fairy-slaying sword formation's magical effect. Almost in an instant, the sword shadow suddenly disappeared. The chaotic air currents descended rapidly like a torrential downpour toward Atlantis. At the sight of this scene, true Lord Qingshan was not happy but shocked instead. Are you crazy? Fang Xinjiang, your men will all die. He couldn't understand why Fang Xinjiang had suddenly become a different person. He didn't care about the lives of his subordinates at all. If they die, you'll be buried with them. In an instant, Fang Xinjiang gave up resisting the entire yin and yang dust formation. He held the thunder tribulation with one hand while the remaining panway, abyss, and white bone swords turned into a sword wheel and floated behind him. He brought along a stream of sword light and shot out, dashing out toward true Lord Qingshan. Sword intense soared into the sky, and sword light flashed explosively. Compared to how he had condensed sword shadows to stare at the entire yin and yang dust formation earlier, Fang Xinjiang gave up on defense and attacked at full force. Holding the thunder tribulation, he brought along a myriad of lightning bolts. Wherever the all-conquering sword passed by, the chaotic air currents would shatter. He instantly opened up a vacuum passageway that led straight to true Lord Qingshan. It was as if a laser beam had shot through the entire cloud layer. Stop it. If you want to kill true Lord, you'll have to get past me first. Two streams of martial will, one white and one green, suddenly appeared before Fang Xinjiang. They were Saint Luluo and Grand Duke Alba. These two unrivaled experts, who had been revived in the past, brought along seething chaotic air currents and stood before Fang Xinjian. They turned into two chaotic longswords and slashed out toward Fang Xinjian. The two of them made their moves, using chaotic air currents to propel the martial arts that they were proud of. Their battle prowess far surpassed the battle prowess they had when they were alive. Fram. However, when faced with the encirclement of the two unrivaled experts, Fang Xinjian let out an explosive bellow and spat out a stream of sword light from his mouth. The infiltrating void sword intense transmitted through space, instantly piercing through the chaotic air currents and hitting the two of them. Amidst loud bangs of explosions, the two unrivaled experts were instantly sent flying for over 1,000 kilometers. During the entire process of flying back, their bodies kept on shattering, leaving behind a myriad of star fragments that scattered down into the sky. It was as if a meteor shower had fallen over the Empire's sky. Saint Luoluo and Grand Duke Alba were killed by Fang Xinjian with a single sword attack. Until the moment before their deaths, their eyes were still filled with disbelief. How is this possible? To think that he could kill us with a single sword attack in the yin and yang dust formation? Electric light flashed explosively, and the thunder tribulation in his hand shattered the chaotic air currents before him. Then Fang Xinjian continued to surge toward True Lord Qingshan. As True Lord Qingshan watched as Fang Xinjian barged in like there was no one around, a hint of panic flashed uncontrollably in his eyes. However, the panic only lasted for a moment, and True Lord Qingshan calmed down very quickly. Fang Xinjian, do you really think that I'm not a match for you? Chaotic air currents gushed forth. At the next moment, they turned into a fist that could encompass a large area of the field, and smashed out toward Fang Xinjian. Three Worlds Eradication. With this punch, the Three Worlds Eradication, propelled by the chaotic air currents, was smashed out. The chaotic air currents instantly turned pitch black, as if the universe had just been created, and the aura of the world's creation spread out. This was True Lord Qingshan's strongest attack. The duality minute formation was able to wipe out everything, and the Three Worlds Eradication was able to destroy all living things in the world. The concept of destroying everything in the world was combined together, killing everything that passed by at the microscopic scale. This punch could instantly kill a Tier 4 Divine level expert and deal serious injuries to a Tier 5 Divine level expert. Some of the weaker Tier 5 Divine level experts would even die under this punch. The duality minute formation's destruction went from the microscopic scale to the macroscopic scale, while the Three Worlds Eradication went from the macroscopic scale to the microscopic scale. The two of them, one inside and one outside, one big and one small, were perfectly combined by True Lord Qingshan at this moment, unleashing a destructive prowess that was several times stronger. Just from this point alone, one had to admit that True Lord Qingshan was really talented. When everyone on the ground saw this punch, their eyes were in a daze. It was as if they had just seen the scene of the world being created and the world being split apart. Everyone was immersed in the astonishment brought about by this punch. However, faced with this punch that encompassed the world and split apart the world, Fang Xinjian merely let out a cold laugh. Trash! The thunder calamity sword light flashed wildly, and Fang Xinjian collided fiercely into the Three Worlds Eradication punch. Bang! The space started to seethe intensely, and the laws of the microscopic world seemed to be shaken by the collision between the two. All the chaotic air currents in the world came to a sudden stop. At the next moment, Fang Xinjian pierced through the huge fist and turned into chaotic air current. He appeared before True Lord Qingshan while bringing along lightning light. Wait a minute, Fang Xinjian, True Lord Qingshan immediately said anxiously through his will. He still had a bargaining chip and knew about the ancient era's relic. Even if he did not have the system, how could he be willing to die here? So noisy. Swoosh. With a single sword attack, it instantly turned into a myriad of sword light that encompassed true Lord Qingshan. In that instant, true Lord Qingshan's conjured physique was crushed into pieces by countless sword light. It was as if a piece of meat had been stirred into meat paste, turning into a myriad of green light. The myriad of green light distorted and gathered together, attempting to condense into true Lord Qingshan's appearance once again. He bellowed furiously, "Fang Xinjian! You can't kill me! The seventh onslaught is about to arrive. You need my help!" Swoosh! Another sword attack was sent out, and sword light pierced through void space, piercing all of the light spots. It instantly stirred the myriad of martial wills into dust once again. "Don't speak. Right now, I only want to kill you." Chapter 800. Sword light filled up the sky, instantly encompassing all of true Lord Qingshan's martial will that had dissipated in the air. The violent thunder calamity pierced through the atmosphere and smashed onto true Lord Qingshan's martial will like many meteors. The glow of each stream of martial will was instantly compressed, crushed, and stirred up, eventually turning into countless light spots that scattered into the air. Fang Xinjian. The final bits of martial will gathered together with great difficulty, twisting and gathering like many small bugs. The glow was so weak that it was not even comparable to that of a firefly. It barely formed true Lord Qingshan's face. Right now, his eyes were filled with terror and regret. At the final moment of his life, he finally regained his clarity of mind because he did not have the system. Wait a minute. However, at the next moment, the thunder calamity completely pierced through true Lord Qingshan's final bit of martial will. It was as if a watermelon had been crushed in an instant, and the final bit of will exploded and dissipated into the air. At the same time that he thrusted out the final sword attack, Fang Xinjian's figure flashed once again. He cut across the sky like a bolt of lightning, descending toward the ground. Just as he consecutively killed Saint Luoluo, Grand Duke Alba, and true Lord Qingshan, the chaotic air currents that had lost control were already less than 50 meters away from the ground. Looking at the plunging sky, everyone looked on in a daze, with only despair left in their eyes. They just stared blankly at this magnificent scene, as if they were attracted by this magnificent scene. The wind pressure continued to be compressed and swept onto the ground by the chaotic air current. The entire world was only left with a tremendous force of 50 meters. Everyone had a feeling of suffocation, allowing the strong gales to blow onto their bodies and faces. "It's over. We're all going to die. Someone save me. I don't wish to die." This continued until a loud sound rang out from the void space in the distance, rousing everyone from their stupor. Bang! It was as if two mountain ranges had collided, or as if meteors in the sky had collided into an ice mountain. The intense sound seemed to want to spread through the entire Great Western region, entering everyone's ears. Even countless apprentice-level commoners fainted from this collision. Amidst this world-shaking collision sound, the plunging sky came to a stop. The boundless chaotic airflow floated in the air 50 meters above the ground. It was a terrifying sight to behold. In the next moment, a beam of sword light shot up into the sky. It was as if a giant had slashed at the sky with a sword. A huge crack appeared in the chaotic air currents in the sky. With an explosive rumble, the sword light exploded out like countless thunderbolts. In that instant, the chaotic air currents in the entire sky were split up by the myriad of sword light. In the end, they turned into countless clouds and rose up into the sky, slowly returning to the microscopic world and dissipating from everyone's gazes. Tyrant looked at the chaotic air currents which had disappeared in the sky, let out a breath, and said, "Was that Xinjian?" The fourth prince also relaxed. "It's him, but I feel a little different. But at least it's settled." A few minutes later, the entire Great Western City and the Academy erupted in cheers, as if rejoicing that they had survived. Elsewhere, the fifth prince's actual body and clone had already reunited. He had gathered 100% of his powers and arrived at the Sand Country. Right now, his cultivation was already at Tier 2 of the divine level. Moving at close to light speed, he arrived at the Sand Country's capital in the blink of an eye. This was a city located in an oasis in the desert. The entire city was like a small island situated in a huge lake. It was an extremely bright lake. One could not even see the end of the lake when standing by the shore. It even gave off the misconception that it was an ocean. This was the birthplace of the Sand Country, the location known as the Origin Sea. In the center of the Origin Sea was a small island with an area of several hundred square kilometers. On the small island was the Sand Country's capital. Legend had it that the entire Origin Sea and the small island had been created by the Sand Country's first leader, the heavenly monarch of the Blood Sea. Thereafter, each generation of Sand Country's leaders would need to maintain the Origin Sea's condition all year round. It was because this man-made inland lake was created by the unrivaled cultivation of a divine-level expert, moving the Earth's veins and condensing water vapor. Only a divine-level expert would be able to possess such unbelievable power. The fifth prince had fled to the Sand Country in order to hide from Fang Xinjian. This was a path of retreat that he had prepared long ago. Once the plan to surround and kill him failed, he would flee to the ends of the desert and join the Sand Country. After all, he possessed unrivaled martial arts and also possessed many secrets regarding the ancient path of hell and the Krieg royal family. To the current leader of the Sand Country, the Sacred Fire Order's patriarch, taking in the fifth prince was more beneficial than detrimental. Therefore, the fifth prince had spent a total of about 4 seconds from the moment his clone escaped to the moment his two bodies merged together. His powers recovered to 100%, traversing across 1,000 lis, crossing the desert, and arriving in the sky above the Origin Sea. This was also because he had spent some time thinking and recognizing the path. Otherwise, with his Tier 2 divine level ability to move at akin to light speed, he would be able to move even faster. However, just as he arrived in the sky above the Origin Sea, a stream of sword light cut across the sky. Fang Xinjian had arrived. Almost at the instant he saw the sword light, the fifth prince's entire body was already flashing explosively with black light as he went all out in defending. It was because he knew that under light speed attacks, when he used his naked eye and not his martial will to see the other party, it would mean that it was already too late. It was because observation with the naked eye relied on the reflection of light rays. Therefore, when one used the naked eye to observe the existence of light speed, they would only be able to see the past. Therefore, the fifth prince's reaction was very fast. Almost at the instant he saw the sword light, black martial will gushed out, encompassing every single physical particle on his body. Concurrently, Fang Xinjian had already pierced his sword into the fifth prince's body. The abyss brought along the infiltrating void sword intense, cutting across space and piercing through the fifth prince's body like an illusion. Although the fifth prince's powers had already protected his entire body, the difference between their cultivation was far too great. Almost at the same time the sword pierced out, sword cheese swam around the fifth prince's entire body. 10,000 streams of blood swords shot out concurrently, and a large hole exploded in the fifth prince's chest. He plunged toward the Sand Country's capital like a falling plane. When Fang Xinjian landed 300 meters above the Sand Country's capital, a transparent barrier instantly lit up. The entire barrier encompassed the capital like a bubble. When the fifth prince landed on the barrier, the rapid pressure caused the barrier to cave in. It was as if there was a finger that kept on pressing down on the bubble. It was only when the bubble caved in to an extreme, causing people to wonder if it would shatter at any moment, that the fifth prince came to a stop, covered in blood. This instantly alarmed countless experts in the entire Sand Country's capital. Streams of auras soared into the sky, and waves of martial will broke through the cloud layers, all of them dashing out toward Fang Xinjian, who was in the sky. Chapter 801. The Sand Country was located at the end of the desert in the east of the empire. It was a country that had risen up in the desert. This country had been ruled by the sacred fire order all year round. Although it was called the Sand Country, it was actually an amalgamation of countless tribes, ethnic groups, and small countries under the sacred fire order's rule. The size of the entire Sand Country was about twice that of the empire. However, as most of the areas were in a desert environment that was difficult to survive in, they were inferior to the empire in terms of population, resources, and national power. Despite this, the countless ethnic groups in the desert had reproduced for several thousand years and still possessed a background that was not inferior to the empire's. This was especially the case in the desert. The people here were valiant and had strong battle prowess. Countless people lived a life of bloodshed, so their pursuit of martial prowess was even stronger. Right now, in the Sand Country's capital, there were several tens of thousands of cultivators and countless high-ranking members of the Sacred Fire Order gathered. Almost at the moment when Fang Xinjian and the fifth prince arrived in the sky above the capital, someone had already noticed the abnormality. When Fang Xinjian seriously injured the fifth prince with a single sword attack, countless experts soared into the sky. The first person to soar into the sky was a man with a muscular physique covered in golden fur. His face and chest were covered in scars. This man gave off the feeling that he was like a sandstorm in the desert. Before he even got close, there was already a sharp and hot feeling. Someone immediately gasped, "That's the Golden Sand Tribe's erupting Sand King. The erupting Sand King is here. That guy is dead meat. Is that guy in the sky someone from the Empire? To think that he dares to launch a surprise attack on our capital single-handedly. He's really courting death." The Golden Sand Tribe was a tribe that was famous for being warlike in the Sand Country. Killing, plundering, and enslaving were their creed. In the desert, countless small countries and tribes would tremble in fear before the Golden Sand Tribe, terrified of their martial prowess. Countless people had their possessions confiscated and their clans wiped out, and their livestock, women, and children were plundered. The Golden Sand Tribe's strongest expert, the erupting Sand King, was one of the 7 divine-level experts in the Sand Country. With his cultivation, he dominated the desert and had destroyed countless ethnic groups and civilizations in the desert. He was an existence that could stop children from crying at night. It was said that he had over 100,000 slaves in his royal court, and there were over 5,000 female slaves in his harem. All of them were top-notch beauties that the various clans and countries had submitted to him. Out of the 7 divine-level experts in the Sand Country, he was the most terrifying and infamous one. The Sandstorm King was not the only one who appeared. At the same time that the beast-like man appeared, another beautiful young woman rose into the sky from the other side of the city. It was a woman wearing extremely revealing clothes that only covered a small part of her chest and buttock. Large areas of her snow-white skin were exposed, especially her pair of round soft breasts, delicate waist, and slender and firm thighs. All of them were filled with the fatal allure of a woman. As soon as the woman appeared, it caused countless people in the city to exclaim. Countless men stared blankly at the beautiful figure in the sky, almost drooling. In particular, the woman's every move had a kind of charm that could turn all living things upside down. It made people's hearts itch even more. It's the heavenly dance monarch. She really is an outstanding beauty. As expected of the #1 beauty in our Sand Country. That's right. To think that I have the honor of seeing the heavenly dance monarch's true appearance today. Even if I were to die right now, I'd be willing. In a bustling market in the northeast of the Sand Country's capital, a few men and women from the Empire were also looking at the situation in the sky in astonishment. One of the women asked, "Leader, what's the background of the heavenly dance monarch?" The person she addressed as leader was a middle-aged man with a weather-beaten face. Hearing the young lady's question, he let out a breath and said, "The Heavenly Dance Monarch is one of the 7 divine-level experts in the Sand Country. She's also the oldest, youngest, and most mysterious one." "What?" The young lady looked at the charming Heavenly Dance Monarch in disbelief, feeling that her brain was not enough to comprehend what was going on. This group of men and women were members of the Empire's intelligence department. They were stationed in the desert all year round, disguised as merchants, and probed and gathered information about the Sand Country. The young lady was a new member sent out by the Empire. She had just reported in not too long ago and was not familiar with the situation in the Sand Country. The leader sighed and said, "We don't know what kind of secret arts the Heavenly Dance Monarch has. She's already over 250 years old, but she's still alive. This has already surpassed the age that a divine-level expert should have. Her legends have been circulating throughout the desert, and countless people in the Sand Country treat her as a real god. They even build temples for her and offer sacrifices to her every year." He then lifted his head and looked at Feng Xinjian, who was in the sky, and said, "The Heavenly Dance Monarch and the Erupting Sand Monarch are both extremely powerful. However, this isn't the most dangerous thing. This is the Sand Country's headquarters. Why is this person so ungrateful? To think that he would charge straight into the Sand Country's capital? How many experts are there here? Even if His Majesty were to come, it would probably be hard for him to escape unscathed." That's Feng Xinjian. The young lady had set off from the Empire 1.5 months ago. She then crossed the desert and arrived in the Sand Country. Clearly, she had heard of the information regarding Feng Xinjian. It was just that as a long time had passed, she was not too sure about it. "Feng Xinjian?" The leader's eyes lit up. "Is he our #1 sword arts genius? The genius who has defeated the School of Sword Arts Supreme Chief, the Undying Xia, the Blue Sacred Moonlight, and even the First Prince?" Although the leader did not know much about Feng Xinjian's latest battle achievements, he had heard a little about Feng Xinjian's impressive battle achievements of defeating divine-level experts in the past. However, at the thought of this, his frown deepened. Why has he barged in single-handedly? He's too rash. Even if he has extraordinary talent and has already stepped into the divine level, it'll be hard for him to fight against so many people. Putting aside the fact that the Sacred Fire Order's Patriarch is in the capital, even the Heavenly Dance Monarch and the Erupting Sand King are not easy to deal with. Moreover, the entire capital is protected by the Sacred Fire Order's formation. Hearing this, the others also looked worriedly at Feng Xinjian, who was in the sky. As the Empire's intelligence personnel, they naturally leaned towards Feng Xinjian, who was also from the Empire. They could not bear to see such an outstanding genius from the Empire fall here. However, they also knew that their leader's analysis was not wrong. The Sand Country's capital could be said to be filled with experts, and it was also protected by a formation that had been accumulated for several centuries. It would be extremely difficult for people from the outside world to attack in. The few of them communicated through information currents, and they finished exchanging information almost instantly. Concurrently, the Erupting Sand King's martial will also extended out like a sandstorm, containing his extremely arrogant disposition. "Someone from the Empire, to think that you dare to hover in the sky above our capital by yourself? If we allow you to return alive, the entire Sand Country will be too embarrassed to face others." He clenched his fists tightly, and his entire body showed signs of turning into sand. "Kneel down and become my slave. I'll give you a chance to lick the soles of my feet." Chapter 802. Among the many countries and tribes in the desert, many of them still maintained the slavery system. To aristocrats, letting their slaves kneel down and lick their feet was the greatest gift they could give to their slave. However, when the erupting Sand King said these words to Fang Xinjian, it was an insult. It was also a common way of insulting aristocrats in the desert. However, regardless of whether it was the erupting Sand King who had said these words, the heavenly dance monarch who was standing at the side, or the countless experts of the Sand Country in the capital, none of them were surprised when they heard these words. Instead, they felt that it was only natural. After all, this was the Sand Country's capital. It had the most superior environment in the entire desert, and countless desert aristocrats, tribal leaders, princes, and aristocrats resided here. At least 1/3 of the Sand Country's experts were currently in the capital. This is the jewel of the desert. There are as many experts as there are hairs on a cow here. There are at least 3 divine-level experts holding down the fort here. Moreover, the cult master is here as well. Similar thoughts seethed in the minds of countless people. They looked at Fang Xinjian, who was in the sky, like they were looking at a clown. The erupting Sand King's eyes were filled with mockery, while the heavenly dance monarch's gaze did not waver. She looked at Fang Xinjian like she was looking at a rock. The eyes of the intelligence team from the Empire lowered, filled with pity. Fang Xinjian, you're too rash. Almost no one thought that the man in the sky still had any hope of barging into the Sand Country's capital and entering the jewel of the desert. Countless people looked at Fang Xinjian, who was in the sky, with pride, pity, or amusement. Only the countenance of the 5th prince, who had crashed into the depression in the light screen, changed drastically. He grabbed onto the light screen with both hands, trying hard to compress it while emitting his martial will and information. Idiot, let me in quickly. The erupting Sand King and the heavenly dance monarch had soared into the sky and arrived outside the formation of the Sand Country's capital, facing Fang Xinjian. To the 5th prince, this was like the Calabash brothers queuing up to die in order to save their grandfather. Everything happened in an instant. Just as the erupting Sand King had insulted Fang Xinjian, just as everyone's thoughts were seething, and just as the 5th prince had issued his warning, Fang Xinjian extended his hand and grabbed at the erupting Sand King. You're quite straightforward with your words. In that case, you'll pay me back with the rest of your life. The moment he stretched out his palm, it immediately brought with it a power that filled up the heavens and the earth and came crashing down. In particular, there were 4 sword intents flashing about in his palm. They were none other than the infiltrating void, light pursuit, all-conquering, and instant sword intents. The 4 types of sword intents formed the celestial eradication sword formation and gathered in Fang Xinjian's palm, exuding waves of profound wave. They were the profoundness of electromagnetic forces, gravity, and strong forces. It was as if Fang Xinjian was holding onto a world in his palm. Facing Fang Xinjian's palm, the erupting Sand King's expression became extremely solemn. So it's a deity-level expert? No wonder you have the guts to come here alone. But where do you think this is? Even if Alexander dares to come alone, he will still die. Waves of martial will that were like a sea of sand shot out from the erupting Sand King's body, and his entire body even turned into sand. This meant that his physical body and will had completely merged into one, turning into an existence with a conjured physique. This was a characteristic of a Tier 3 divine-level expert. The martial will that was like the yellow sand in the sky turned into a huge palm. Before it even got close, there was already a scorching feeling gushing out, and the moisture in the air disappeared rapidly. If it was not because the entire desert capital was protected by a formation, the entire capital would probably dry up and turn into a desert within a few minutes. This was the erupting Sand King's famous ultimate skill, Desert Hell. When used in this desert environment, its prowess was extremely great. The erupting Sand King had once wiped out an entire tribe with a single attack, turning 50,000 desert warriors into dried corpses. At the next moment, the 2 huge palms collided fiercely. However, it was like a diamond colliding against tofu. The yellow sand in the sky was instantly smashed up by Fang Xinjian's palm. Under countless astonished gazes, the yellow sand in the sky was smashed up by a single palm, leaving the erupting Sand King flying out with his shattered body. How is this possible? Even a Tier 4 divine level expert wouldn't be able to defeat me with a single attack like this. Who on earth are you? The erupting Sand King looked at Fang Xinjian in disbelief, unable to believe everything that had happened before his eyes. Simultaneously, his body kept on shattering and breaking down at an accelerated rate. This palm attack from Fang Xinjian had clearly severed all of his life force. At the sight of this scene, the heavenly dance monarch's countenance changed drastically. Even though the erupting Sand King was not a match for her, he was not too far off from her in terms of strength. To think that he had been killed with a single attack! How terrifying was he! Without much time to think, she retreated into the formation with a flash of light. Simultaneously, after Fang Xinjian's palm attack, the world changed, and 4 streams of sword light soared into the sky. They were the Abyss Sword, Thunder Calamity Sword, Panway Sword, and White Bone Sword. The 4 long swords flew out in 4 directions, surrounding Fang Xinjian. They brought along seething lightning, spatial ripples, and a myriad of sword light, turning into the celestial eradication sword formation and instantly encompassing the area within a range of 100,000 meters. The sword formation circled above the formation of the desert capital, pressing together with the formation and colliding with each other. Occasionally, colorful and smooth explosions would erupt, as if there were a myriad of nuclear missiles exploding simultaneously. However, the explosions were fended off by the 2 great formations. Seeing the 2 great formations pressing and colliding with each other, the countenances of everyone in the city changed drastically once again. The formation in the sky above the city kept on twisting and changing. It was like a spring that wanted to bounce back. However, the celestial eradication sword formation was like a majestic mountain range, pressing down steadily in midair. It was like the Hulk was pressing down on the Black Widow, causing the entire formation to be unable to move. The citizens of the Sand Country who lived in the capital had always been proud of their city, and the formation in the sky above the capital had protected the entire city time and time again. However, not only had the erupting Sand King been killed with a single strike, but the city protection formation that the Sand Country's citizens were so proud of was also being suppressed by the other party single-handedly. How could the crowd not be frightened when they saw this? However, at the next moment, this astonishment and fear turned into soaring vengeance and fury. Fang Xinjian had killed the erupting Sand King with a single palm before almost all the citizens and members of the upper echelon in the desert capital, and he was even thinking of suppressing the city protection formation. This was a humiliation to the entire Sand Country, let alone the many tribes in the Sand Country, who were extremely bloodthirsty. It was as if the United States fighter jets had flown one round in the sky above Beijing, and even bombed a building. A bearded man dressed in white robes glared furiously at Fang Xinjian, who was in the sky. Explosive sounds rang out from all the joints throughout his body, and his white robes were torn apart. He bellowed furiously, "Man from the Empire, you've killed our erupting Sand King and humiliated our city. I won't rest until you're dead. I won't rest until you're dead." Another man stood up and bellowed furiously, "No matter who you are, no matter what remarkable abilities you have, everyone in our Sand Country will fight it out with you to the death today. Everyone, we mustn't let this thief escape. Even if I have to give up my life, I'll kill him. I won't rest until I'm dead. I won't rest until I'm dead. I won't rest until I'm dead." Chapter 803. The entire city seemed to be burning up. Countless shouts gradually gathered together, seeming to want to shake the mountains and rivers and tear apart the clouds and sky. A fervent will spreading out in the sky above the entire city. The people from the Empire's intelligence team stood in the market. Sensing the fervent aura in the surroundings, their countenances changed drastically. All of the Sand Country's merchants in the surroundings seemed to have turned into wolves. Even the people from the intelligence team could sense countless sharp gazes piercing into them. They were also from the Empire, and the gazes from the surroundings seemed to want to kill them at the very next moment. This is bad. This Fang Xinjian has stirred up a hornet's nest. Even if he can escape, we'll be dead for sure. The countenances of a few of the Empire's intelligence team members turned pale as they picked up their weapons, seeming to be prepared to fight at any moment. The team leader raised his head and looked at Fang Xinjian, who was in the sky. He sighed inwardly. Even if you can kill the erupting Sand King with a single strike, will you be able to escape the pursuit of the entire Sand Country? At the thought of the information regarding the entire Sand Country and the many famous experts of the Sand Country appeared in his mind, his countenance turned increasingly grim. The Sand Country spanned across the entire eastern desert region and had a legacy of several thousand years of civilization. The foundation of this civilization was not much weaker than that of the Empire. Moreover, the Sacred Fire Order's patriarch, the strongest expert in this civilization, was a legendary Tier 5 divine-level expert. However, Fang Xinjian only threw a casual glance toward the enraged people and then turned his gaze toward the fifth prince. The countenance of the fifth prince, who was encompassed by the celestial eradication sword formation and pressed down at the bottom, instantly turned pale. Fang Xinjian looked at the fifth prince coldly and said slowly, "I said 5 seconds. Close to 10 seconds have passed. Have you thought of your last words?" The fifth prince's face twitched fiercely, and his eyes were filled with craziness, regret, and terror. "Old sacred fire, if you dare to watch me die, then you can forget about knowing the secrets of the ancient path of hell forever." Fang Xinjian let out a cold snort. With a single thought, endless sword light descended toward the fifth prince. At this most dangerous moment in his life, the fifth prince unleashed all of his potential. The fifth prince's entire body flickered with black flames, and amidst the extreme distortions in space, he punched out, turning into a spiral space and smashing out. It was another 3 realms annihilation, but this time, it had a new breakthrough in its control over spatial distortions. The entire space continued to spiral and twist, deflecting all the attacks in front of it. It broke through the sword light that filled the sky and pierced straight towards Fang Xinjian. I broke through, amidst extreme fury, terror, and regret. The fifth prince relied on his best fist art in the world and finally attained another breakthrough. The prowess of the 3 worlds' eradication increased once again, reaching the limits of spatial distortions below Tier 5 of the divine level. It could almost distort and tear apart any pure shock waves or heat energy attack. You've broken through? Fang Xinjian's gaze flickered. He had naturally sensed the changes in the fifth prince. With a slight flick of his finger, the surrounding sword light turned into light and shot out. At the next moment, a stream of light pursuit sword intent pierced through the fifth prince's fist, instantly tearing off his entire right arm. The fifth prince, who had yet to completely attain his conjured physique, instantly bled profusely. Fresh blood spurted out like a fountain, bringing with it a rain of blood as he landed on the light screen. Immediately after, a myriad of sword light flashed in the sky, wanting to dismember the fifth prince completely. No. I don't want to die. I've just comprehended a higher realm in fist arts. I still have the world's best fist arts talent. Give me another month and I'll be able to strive for Tier 3 or even Tier 4 of the divine level. How can I die? How can I die? Under the crazy will to survive, the fifth prince unleashed his final burst of potential. His black martial will seem to have turned into a huge demonic face that bellowed crazily in midair. At the next moment, the fifth prince stood up and punched out with his undamaged left arm. At the instant he punched out, his entire body started to burn up crazily. At this moment, all the physical particles in his body started to burn up fiercely, releasing energy incessantly. Under the repeated pressure, the fifth prince had almost squeezed out his talent to an extreme. Right now, he was even welcoming his second breakthrough. He burned the physical particles in his body and stimulated the powers of the microscopic world in his body. At this moment, he started to advance toward the microscopic world from his means of spatial distortions, which was the microscopic realm. Feng, Xing, Jian. 3 worlds eradication, self-destruction realm. With a punch, the atmosphere seemed to be seething and burning. At this moment, the fifth prince's spirit, will, and physical body were all burning up. The physical particles throughout his body unleashed seething powers, even causing the powers of the microscopic world to be slightly released. This allowed this punch to reach a realm that he had never reached before. At this moment, I am at my strongest. However, it was only after forcefully stepping into the microscopic realm that the fifth prince suddenly felt despair. It was because his martial will could sense that all the physical particles within a range of 100,000 meters were seething incessantly. His opponent's countless sword forces were moving about and sweeping through the microscopic world. If it was said that the fifth prince had felt that the Feng Xinjian he saw earlier was Duguqiubai, then now that he had forcefully stepped into the microscopic realm and looked at the Feng Xinjian, he felt as if he was looking at Frisia. This might be a realm that I'll never be able to reach in my entire life. With extreme despair, the fifth prince sent out his final attack, and his body was instantly engulfed by sword light. A short moment later, over 80% of the fifth prince's body was shattered. However, he still managed to survive amidst a stretch of white flames. High up in the sky, a human figure formed from pure white flames blocked the fifth prince's path. The Sacred Fire Order's patriarch, who was the strongest expert in the Sand Country and had the strength of a Tier 5 divine-level expert, had finally appeared. Feng Xinjian, how dare you make a move in my territory? Do you really want to die that much? Almost at the instant the Sacred Fire Order's patriarch appeared, the entire city broke out in cheers. Countless experts in the Sand Country admired and believed in this spiritual leader of the entire desert. The Sacred Fire Order was the greatest religion in the desert, and almost 3/4 of the population believed in this religion. Moreover, when the country was being humiliated and its heroes were being killed, this strongest expert had appeared. As the leader of the Sacred Fire Order, the patriarch was said to be a god who walked amongst the mortals. Countless people believed that he was a half-human, half-god, and an invincible existence. He was also the reason why the people in the city still dared to call out for Feng Xinjian's death after seeing the Desert Storm King being killed with a single attack. Therefore, at the moment when the Sacred Fire Order's patriarch appeared, the entire city burst into an uproar. Kill him, Lord Patriarch! Burn this heretic to death! Burn this heretic to death! Maniacal shouts rang out, and the entire city was like a bucket of boiling water, seething intensely. Chapter 804. Looking at the seething desert capital, the fifth prince was stunned for a moment before he smiled at the next moment. He looked at Feng Xinjian, who was in the sky, and thought coldly, Feng Xinjian, even though your sword arts are world-shaking, you've already made an enemy out of the entire empire. Do you dare to make an enemy out of the entire Sand Country? Even if you can defeat my father, there's no way you'll be able to kill me in the Sand Country's territory with the help of the Sacred Fire Order's patriarch and the city's protective formation that has been passed down for several centuries. The Sand Country's overall strength was slightly inferior to the Empire's. However, the Sacred Fire Order had plundered the entire desert and enslaved millions and millions of people for countless years. Their accumulations far surpassed that of the Krieg royal family. At this moment, the fifth prince relaxed, feeling extremely thankful that he had managed to keep his life. Thankfully, I made preparations and contacted the Sacred Fire Order's patriarch. Otherwise, I'd really be dead this time around. Moreover, even if he wants to continue with the Sacred Fire Order's patriarch and the formation in the desert capital, it'll be impossible for him to kill me. Simultaneously, the Sacred Fire Order's patriarch took a step forward, and a myriad of white flames rose up. The entire formation in the desert capital was completely activated under the patriarch's control, and endless flames extended out from the light screen. These flames gathered in the sky, forming an upside-down city that hung in the sky. The light screen that protected the entire capital seemed to have turned into a mirror. Below the mirror was the jewel of the desert, the Sand Country's capital. A city of flames hung upside down above the mirror. It was no different from the entire desert capital, as if it was a copy of the city reflected in the mirror. The only difference was that this upside-down city was completely formed from flames. The Sacred Fire Order's patriarch had used the powers of the entire formation to activate his divine country, the Great Radiant World. Endless flames danced to and fro. This was a combination of 49 types of sacred flames and the 9 great divine flames that the Sacred Fire Order's patriarch had left behind in the headquarters. It could be said to have the ability to split the world apart and create and destroy the world. At this moment, the Great Radiant World borrowed the power of the entire capital to appear in the material world. It was like a heavenly palace hanging upside down in the sky, and the surging firepower and energy within it was a terrifying number. It was estimated to be able to supply Demonic City with electricity for several hundred years. With the appearance of the Great Radiant World, the crowd in the capital city also broke into a commotion. Countless people revealed expressions of admiration as they dropped to their knees and prostrated on the ground, offering up all their faith to the Sacred Fire Order's patriarch. Similar to the formation of the Full Moon Shrine, the reason why the Sacred Flame Order wanted to set up a religion was, on one hand, to unify the thoughts of the desert tribes so that it would be easier to govern them. On the other hand, it was because the founder, the Heavenly Lord of the Blood Sea, had a set of methods to collect the information currents scattered by humans. He collected all the thoughts of worship and belief and used them as energy. With the appearance of the Great Radiant World, countless people prostrated themselves on the ground. The entire flaming city of the Great Radiant World burned even more fiercely, as if a basin of oil had been poured onto a raging fire. Sensing that overwhelming power, the confidence in the Sacred Fire Order's patriarch's gaze grew even stronger. Previously, when the Sacred Fire Order's patriarch fought against Fang Xinjian, he had only relied on his own powers. This time around, the Sacred Fire Order's patriarch was backed by the Sand Country's capital, the Sacred Fire Order's headquarters. The formation that had been erected there for several centuries was the result of the hard work of several generations of the Sacred Fire Order's leaders, as well as countless heavenly and earthly treasures from across the entire desert. Right now, the Sacred Fire Order's patriarch's battle prowess was at least 3 times stronger than when he had first met Fang Xinjian. Therefore, he was filled with confidence right now. At this moment, it's impossible for Fang Xinjian to defeat me in our sect's headquarters. The patriarch's eyes narrowed slightly, and thoughts kept on churning in his mind. Then, should I take this opportunity to kill him? The Sacred Fire Order's patriarch felt that there was definitely a secret for Fang Xinjian to be able to raise his strength to such a level within a mere 3 years. If he could get his hands on this secret. Just the thought of it made the Sacred Fire Order's patriarch feel a little agitated. Moreover, the fact that Fang Xinjian had taken the initiative to chase him to the Sacred Fire Order's headquarters was a heaven-sent opportunity to the patriarch. Therefore, after taking a step forward, he said directly, "Fang Xinjian, kneel down and surrender. Be my Sacred Fire Order's slave for 100 years, and I can spare your life." As he spoke, the Great Radiant World pressed down, and violent heat waves gushed forth as if wanting to incinerate the entire city. Countless sparks turned into many huge dragons that seethed to and fro. In the blink of an eye, they encompassed the area within a range of several tens of kilometers. The great radiant world, which was hanging upside down in the sky, and the capital's formation came pressing down from above and below. It was as if there was a huge invisible mouth that held the celestial eradication sword formation within. It kept on squeezing and rubbing against each other, clashing in void space-time and time again. It was as if a 100,000-ton aircraft carrier was being smashed into the ground time and time again. Right now, not only was the Sacred Fire Order's Patriarch extremely powerful and unfathomable, but he also had the Sacred Fire Order's secret legacy, the inextinguishable conjured physique. With the Sacred Fire Order's 1,000-year faith, he was able to regenerate endlessly. Right now, in the sky above the desert capital, the Sacred Fire Order's Patriarch had an inextinguishable body. Therefore, he was even more fearless. The overwhelming prowess he displayed in this instant far surpassed that of when true Lord Qingshan was controlling the duality minute formation earlier. However, Fang Xinjian's gaze swept out toward the Sacred Fire Order's Patriarch, the fifth prince, and the entire city. Within a range of 100,000 meters, there was enmity toward him everywhere. The entire city and all the people in the city wanted to kill him. The fifth prince's eyes were filled with rejoicing over his misfortune, while the Sacred Fire Order's Patriarch's gaze was filled with endless confidence, as if the situation was under his control. Throwing a glance toward everyone present, Fang Xinjian put out a finger gently, and a stream of sword light lit up on his fingertip like a rising sun. At the next moment, a myriad of sword light swept out toward the Sacred Fire Order's Patriarch. Faced with a myriad of sword light, the Sacred Fire Order's Patriarch's conjured physique kept on retreating, trembling, and scattering everywhere. It was like a flame that had been extinguished, continuously being slashed and weakened by the sword light. However, no matter how he was attacked, at the moment when the flames were about to be extinguished, they would once again strengthen, rise, and return to their original state. It's useless, Fang Xinjian. The Sacred Fire Order's Patriarch laughed out loud and said, "My inextinguishable conjured flames are truly an inextinguishable body. You won't be able to kill me." As he spoke, the great radiant world in the sky came pressing down explosively. The entire city of flames came pressing down like a mountain pressing down. The ferocious aura caused the countenances of everyone in the city to change. This was despite the fact that the great radiant world's target was not them. Fang Xinjian, who was the first to be affected, also seemed to be scared silly. He looked at the great radiant world that came pressing down in a daze, not reacting at all. Chapter 805. Since you're so stubborn, I'll cripple your sword arts first. Amidst the endless flames, the area within a range of several 100,000 meters was encompassed by the great radiant world's flames. As the great radiant world pressed down, layers of stacking strong gales came pressing down, causing the space to distort incessantly and sending out waves of ripples. The pressure above Fang Xinjian's head was so immense that it was speechless. Fang Xinjian seemed to have suddenly reacted, drew his sword, and slashed out at the great radiant world in the sky. However, the great radiant world's collision seemed to be too ferocious. The streams of sword light that Fang Xinjian shot out were extinguished like many candles. Under the confident gaze of the Sacred Fire Order's Patriarch, they were completely suppressed by the light screen in the sky above the capital. Above his head was the boundless city of flames, and below his feet was the light screen of the formation that encompassed the entire city. It pressed down on Fang Xinjian and the celestial eradication sword formation from both top and bottom. It was as if the entire world had turned into a huge millstone, suppressing Fang Xinjian completely. Streams of flames and light surrounded him, making it hard for Fang Xinjian to move like an insect trapped in amber. Right now, the combined powers of the great radiant world and the capital's formation had indeed surpassed the powers of Feng Xinjian and the celestial eradication sword formation. In a head-on confrontation, Feng Xinjian was no longer a match for them. After all, it was the heavenly and earthly treasures that the Sacred Fire Order had spent countless years plundering the desert, as well as the accumulation of faith over countless years. The powers they contained were hard to calculate, and even the Sacred Fire Order's patriarch was unable to unleash them completely. Before this power, even the heavens will collapse and the earth will tear apart. Even Alexander or those guardian kings from the church can forget about defeating me here. With absolute confidence, the Sacred Fire Order's patriarch stepped into void space and slowly appeared before the suppressed Feng Xinjian. Looking at how Feng Xinjian kept on struggling but was unable to move, the Sacred Fire Order's patriarch shook his head and said with a smile, "Feng Xinjian, do you know that right now, you look like a rat caught in a trap? It's really ugly." Following Feng Xinjian's actions, everyone in the city cheered in unison. "Burn him! I'll make this heretic regret this day forever. Long live the holy flame!" Looking at the cheers around them, the faces of the Imperial Intelligence team were gloomy. One of the new girls could not help but ask through the information currents, "Leader, can you think of a way to save Feng Xinjian?" The captain shook his head and sighed. "What can we do to save him? This is the Sand Country's headquarters. You've seen it for yourself. Even if Feng Xinjian killed the erupting Sand King with a single strike, he was still unable to put up any resistance before the Sacred Fire Order's patriarch. This is the power of a Tier 5 divine-level expert. It's also the reason why the Sand Country has the confidence to stand tall in this world and what they can rely on to go up against our empire. To him, we are no different from dust. Right now, the only thing we can do is to widen our eyes and watch the entire process of Feng Xinjian's death. We must record this information down firmly. This is the only thing we can do." Everyone lowered their heads helplessly. Although it was a pity that Feng Xinjian had fallen here, they knew that the captain was right. Right now, the only thing they could do was to record this information down. The Sacred Fire Order's patriarch looked at Feng Xinjian and continued, "Why? Are you still going to struggle? If you still don't give up, I won't continue to be so polite." Struggle? Feng Xinjian, who was being suppressed by the great radiant world in the sky and the formation protective barrier on the ground, suddenly looked toward the Sacred Fire Order's patriarch. His expression was extremely cold, as if the person being suppressed was not him. "I'm just curious. Do you really have the misconception that you're suppressing me now?" Misconception? The Sacred Fire Order's patriarch's expression was stunned. Then he felt his vision blur. The person being suppressed was not Feng Xinjian but the fifth prince. Right now, the fifth prince was being suppressed by the two tremendous forces and had already turned into light spots, leaving only a phantom image that was about to dissipate. The fifth prince in the phantom image was filled with fury, despair, and regret. He glared at the Sacred Fire Order's patriarch like he was saying, "Why did you kill me?" However, in the end, he was still crushed into a series of light spots, completely dissipating into the air. This prince of the Krieg royal family, an expert who had the world's best fist arts talent and was also an expert who contained countless secrets, had finally died completely. At the sight of this scene, the Sacred Fire Order's patriarch was infuriated. "What have you done? What have I done?" A soft voice rang out in the Sacred Fire Order's patriarch's ears. "Are you sure that you didn't do something?" The Sacred Fire Order's patriarch turned to take a look. Feng Xinjian had unknowingly appeared next to him. He let out an enraged bellow and punched out. Accompanied by streams of meteor flames, Feng Xinjian's figure instantly dissipated. Illusory arts. These are all illusory arts. Illusory arts. In the capital, Feng Xinjian, who was dressed in white robes and riding on a camel, raised his head and met the Sacred Fire Order's patriarch's gaze. "Are you sure?" "Humph." The Sacred Fire Order's patriarch raised his hands, and the great radiant world trembled fiercely. Endless firepower gathered, forming a vortex that was formed from streams of flames. At the center of the flame vortex, a huge black egg descended slowly. Just one look at it would be enough to sense the terrifying destructive prowess it contained. This was the Sacred Fire Order's secret martial technique. The egg of world creation was a supreme martial technique that simulated and calculated the state before the world was created, condensing endless firepower. In the capital, many warriors, merchants, slaves, and maids raised their heads. All of them revealed Fang Xinjian's face and said in Fang Xinjian's voice, "Are you sure that it's me this time around?" The Sacred Fire Order's patriarch's eyes widened abruptly, and his martial will swept out wildly. However, he was unable to sense any changes between the countless Fang Xinjians. More and more people in the capital lifted their heads. All of them were Fang Xinjians. At this moment, everyone in the entire city seemed to have turned into Fang Xinjian's appearance. They looked at the Sacred Fire Order's patriarch and revealed an inexplicable smile, causing the patriarch's hair to stand on end. Then all of the Fang Xinjians asked in unison, "Are you really going to kill me?" The Sacred Fire Order's patriarch's hand started trembling. The egg of world creation in the sky was as heavy as Mount Tai, yet it could not descend no matter what. Right now, when Fang Xinjian first unleashed a myriad of sword light toward the Sacred Fire Order's patriarch, his conjured physique had already turned into countless rays of light encompassing the world along with a myriad of sword light. His body seemed to be formed from countless photons, scattering out in the space within a range of 100,000 meters. He seemed to have become waves, yet he also seemed to have become particles. This was a state that was at a higher level than the light pursuit sword technique's light body. When he existed in such a state, he immediately sensed that the world was different. Chapter 806. This was the result of Fang Xinjian's compulsory cultivation after staying in Charlot's body during this period of time. Fang Xinjian's application of the light pursuit sword had improved, and he had a deeper understanding of the profoundness of electromagnetic forces, gravity, and strong interaction. He had taken another step forward on the path of microscopic control and was able to trigger the illusory powers of the celestial eradication sword formation. He was no longer purely attacking and killing his opponents in the microscopic world. Instead, he was changing the magnitude and direction of the three types of forces to change the macroscopic world, creating all sorts of marvelous effects. However, Fang Xinjian had not been able to unleash this power very well. However, when the restraints on Fang Xinjian were removed by the Purple Mage King, his grasp over his senses and emotions, as well as the illusory arts caused by them, immediately broke through the limits. Humans' senses, knight's senses, divine-level expert senses, and even their emotions. The foundation is non-physical contact, the collisions of waves, and the reflection of light rays. To sum it up, they are electromagnetic waves. Grasping electromagnetic waves means grasping the human heart. At this moment, Fang Xinjian's sword arts were no longer purely attacking the microscopic world with his powers. Instead, he was using his own powers to stir up storms and waves in the microscopic world, creating all sorts of unbelievable phenomena. Fang Xinjian's entire body spread out within the range of the celestial eradication sword formation, and the entire world seemed to have turned into countless waves and particles. Neither the Sacred Fire Order's patriarch nor the people from the Sand Country seemed to care about him. When the Purple Mage King removed the restraints on him, and when he performed the light pursuit sword technique's cultivation results for the first time, he seemed to be able to observe many things in the microscopic world that he had not been able to see in the past. The light pursuit sword technique seemed to have undergone a mutation due to the changes in his emotions. Many scenes of light and shadows appeared before him. Some of them were very familiar, while others were very foreign to him. As Fang Xinjian continued to use his powers to change the various waves and particles in the microscopic world, the Sacred Fire Order's patriarch, who was in the macroscopic world, also saw many drastic changes. Divine-level experts tended to sense the world through their martial will. Through reading the information in the ether particles, they could obtain information such as height, length, speed, temperature, brightness, and so on. They would then regroup the information in their minds as if they were using their martial will to see it. However, the essence of his martial will was still electromagnetic waves, and what he read was still various light waves, radiation, and electromagnetic waves. Therefore, when Fang Xinjian's sword intent entered the microscopic world, it did not just destroy with brute force. Instead, it started to strengthen, weaken, and change electromagnetic waves. After the Sacred Fire Order's patriarch received all sorts of information that Fang Xinjian had changed, he was able to create all sorts of illusions. As for the human body's sense of sight, hearing, and touch, they couldn't escape either. In fact, they were even easier to fake. What you want to see is what I want you to see. What you want to hear is what I want you to hear. Together with Fang Xinjian, the celestial eradication sword formation turned into an invisible force that spread out within a radius of 100,000 meters. In the vision of the Sacred Fire Order's patriarch, not only did the people in the entire city turn into Fang Xinjian, but even the back of his own hand also had Fang Xinjian's face. Are you going to kill me? Another face darted out from the Sacred Fire Order's patriarch's chest. Are you going to kill me? The Sacred Fire Order's patriarch struck out with his palm, smashing the face on his chest into smithereens. However, his body was also injured, and light fragments shot out in all directions. Illusions. These are all illusions. The Sacred Fire Order's patriarch's gaze narrowed. Not only did the attack on his chest make him feel pain, but it also allowed him to calm down once again. His expression also became extremely solemn. To think that you can directly tamper with the information that my martial will has obtained. But illusions are illusions. I'll just recreate the information of the environment. Streams of sparks extended out from his body, and an endless amount of heat energy gathered in the air. They kept on forming many temperature zones that extended out in all directions from his body. The Sacred Fire Order's patriarch was exploring the entire world through artificially changing the heat radiation. Even the entire great radiant world trembled under his control, sending streams of sparks scattering down and forming many different temperature zones. As these temperature zones were formed, many different substances that were subjected to heat were once again constructed in his mind, causing the surrounding scenes to appear in his mind once again. The Fang Xinjian on his body completely disappeared, and everyone on the ground returned to normal. All the illusions disappeared in an instant. I see you. Amidst the Sacred Fire Order's patriarch's detection, Fang Xinjian, who was in the sky about 1 kilometer away from him, was looking at him in astonishment. It was as if Fang Xinjian had not expected that his illusory arts had been broken through. A furious will seethed. With a single thought from the Sacred Fire Order's patriarch, the seething flames in the surroundings surrounded Fang Xinjian in layers. At the next moment, the egg of world creation above his head broke through the air and struck out toward where Fang Xinjian was at. It was as if the world had opened up once again and the universe had exploded. As the egg of world creation collided, endless white light burst out, and a high temperature of over 10 million degrees vaporized everything where Fang Xinjian was at. All the physical matter in the world seemed to have disappeared at this moment, leaving behind only heat energy. Even if he doesn't die from this attack, he will be seriously injured. The Sacred Fire Order's patriarch let out a cold laugh and once again probed where Fang Xinjian was at. However, at the next moment, another soft voice rang out next to his ear. Where are you looking? What? The Sacred Fire Order's patriarch turned his head abruptly and saw that Fang Xinjian was standing behind him, unscathed. Fang Xinjian was looking curiously at the spot where the egg of world creation had exploded earlier. The Sacred Fire Order's patriarch said in disbelief, "Was that an illusion earlier?" Fang Xinjian's palm slapped gently onto the Sacred Fire Order's patriarch's shoulder and said, "When did you think that you've broken through my illusory arts?" The explosions in the Sacred Fire Order's patriarch's martial will slowly dissipated, and the Heavenly Dance Monarch's remnant martial will was revealed. She only left behind an extremely unwilling expression before completely dissipating into the world. Ah! The Sacred Fire Order's patriarch's face contorted, revealing an extremely enraged expression. Flames seethed above the great radiant world, as if several tens or over 100 volcanoes were about to erupt. However, he still did not make a move. Or rather, he did not dare to make a move at all. He was afraid that if he were to make another move, he would destroy the entire desert capital. Are illusory arts at the microscopic realm so terrifying to such an extent? The Sacred Fire Order's patriarch revealed an unwilling expression. Although he had yet to reach the microscopic realm, it was recorded in the Sacred Fire Order's manuals. Of course, he also knew that the fundamental goal of advancing from Tier 1 to 5 of the divine level was to step into the microscopic realm. Only by stepping into the microscopic realm would one have a chance of continuing to attain breakthroughs. Looking at the Sacred Fire Order's patriarch who had stopped his attacks, Fang Xinjian said calmly, "You're not going to make a move anymore? But are you sure that you really didn't make a move?" Chapter 807. What? The eyelids of the Sacred Fire Order's patriarch twitched fiercely. He lifted his head and saw that the entire city had turned into ruins. Several 100,000 citizens of the Sand Country had been turned into charcoal, and even the entire great radiant world had fallen onto the capital. The two cities, flames and matter, encompassed each other, completely vaporizing all the living creatures inside and outside the city. I clearly didn't make a move. Fang Xinjian looked at the Sacred Fire Order's patriarch and said, "Is that true? Are you sure that your senses toward your body, your own powers, and the great radiant world are all real?" "I'm sure." The Sacred Fire Order's patriarch's tone was extremely certain. He looked at Fang Xinjian and said, "They're all illusions. I didn't make a move, and the city wasn't destroyed either. It's because I can still sense the existence of the formation. Even at the microscopic realm, it's impossible for me to directly tamper with the powers grasped by others. Therefore, what I saw were all illusions. As long as we're in this city, it's impossible for you to kill me. As long as I don't make a move, there's nothing you can do," the Sacred Fire Order's patriarch said as he looked coldly at Fang Xinjian. "Are you able to keep up with this illusory art? To be able to use your powers on the microscopic world and keep on performing the microscopic realm? The energy depletion isn't something that can be easily achieved. Are you really not going to make a move?" Fang Xinjian looked at the Sacred Fire Order's patriarch and smiled. Simultaneously, a spot of sword light lit up on his fingertip. It was like a star that was shrinking in the universe, emitting streams of light that pierced through the sky. The eyelids of the Sacred Fire Order's patriarch twitched, and his palms opened up before clenching tightly again. He said coldly, "Don't even think of lying to me. I won't make a move. Who is this? My great priest? My disciple? Or the Sand Country's princess?" Fang Xinjian did not reply. He merely tapped out with a finger, and the sword light on his fingertips scattered out. It was like a meteor shower scattering across the entire capital. These sword lights were all formed from infiltrating void sword intent. They moved across space, and did not care about the protection of the formation at all. They pierced through the city and landed on everyone's bodies like illusions. "Is it okay to watch me attack your people?" At the sight of this scene, the eyes of the Sacred Fire Order's patriarch narrowed slightly. He kept on glancing between the people in the city and Fang Xinjian, but he did not make a move. However, the hesitation in his gaze grew increasingly stronger. The sword light dissipated, and Fang Xinjian threw an indifferent glance toward the Sacred Fire Order's patriarch. "I'll leave your life here for now. The next time I come, I will take it away." The words Fang Xinjian had left behind kept ringing out in his mind, and the Sacred Fire Order's patriarch's countenance turned extremely grim. He looked abruptly in the direction of the city, only to see that the entire city was in a state of chaos. Countless people were crying out, and there were furious bellows, agonizing cries, and cries of despair everywhere. Under the gazes of the several million people in the city, the entire battle process was extremely simple. Countless piercing sword light lit up on Fang Xinjian's fingertips, and the Sacred Fire Order's patriarch stood there like a fool. "This sword attack is to punish you for your crime of disrespect. If you do this again, I'll definitely bathe the entire Sand Country in blood." Then the sword light pierced through the air and sank into the bodies of the several million people in the city. Each of the Sand Country's people who were pierced through by the sword light discovered that their lives were not in danger at the start. However, they then let out agonizing cries. It was because the several million people in the desert had all discovered that their systems had disappeared. The night systems of several million people had vanished without a trace. When a knight reached the divine level, they basically did not need to rely on their system's cultivation anymore. They completely relied on their comprehension of the world, the control of their powers, the cultivation of manuals and secret arts, and their progress in the nine-tiered heavens. However, regardless of whether it was second transition experts' skill synthesis, first transition experts' job transitions, conversion of potential, apprentices' job transitions, or nurturing and training techniques, all of them required the existence of systems. Without the assistance of systems, almost all experts below the divine level had lost the ability to cultivate and become stronger. To the Sand Country's upper echelon, aristocrats, commoners, soldiers, and even slaves, what did it mean for them to lose the possibility to cultivate? It was an ending that was worse than hell. Countless people knelt on the ground, staring blankly at their own hand. They could no longer feel their attributes, skills, or even the existence of the system. This was the first time they had ever felt that they were so unfamiliar with their physical bodies. "God, have you given up on your people? Lord Patriarch, we can't cultivate anymore. Techniques, attributes. We can't sense anything." Therefore, some people started to kowtow in Fang Xinjian's direction. Some people even prostrated themselves on the ground, wearing expressions of regret. Tears and snot covered their faces. Many of them even treated Fang Xinjian, who was in the sky, as a god. To think that he can take away our cultivation foundation. Could he be a god? To them, being able to take away their systems was an unprecedented miracle. Everyone in Miracle World was born with systems, and they were like a part of their bodies, existing only in their will and thoughts. Even divine-level experts had not been able to sever their systems. Faced with such a situation, it was understandable for them to treat Fang Xinjian as a god. "My lord, please spare us. God, please forgive us for our sins and ignorance. I'm willing to offer up all of my wealth, all of my women, and all of my slaves. Please bestow me with the right to cultivate once again." After this sword attack, he left behind a city of terror. Fang Xinjian threw a cold glance toward the city under his feet. Then with a flash, he disappeared completely, leaving behind the people in the city who had sunk into chaos and breakdown. Looking at Fang Xinjian, who had disappeared into the sky, the Empire's intelligence team wore expressions of great astonishment and despair. It was because Fang Xinjian's earlier sword attack had been indiscriminate. After all, there were several million people in the city. How could Fang Xinjian possibly differentiate between them when he had instantly attacked with his sword? This meant that their group's systems had also been cut off. The team leader looked in the direction of the sky, and the corners of his lips curled up into a bitter smile. To think that he was able to slash off their cultivation foundation with a single sword attack. This person's sword arts are really amazing. Another young lady who had just arrived said. He barged into the Sand Country alone with his sword. Not only did he kill the erupting Sand King, but he also forced the Sacred Fire Order's patriarch to slash off the cultivation foundation of the entire country's upper echelon right before the patriarch. It's really... No one could think of any words to describe the impression that Fang Xinjian had left in their hearts. They only knew that with Fang Xinjian's attack this time around, an unprecedented storm would be stirred up across the entire desert. All the upper echelon below the divine level had lost their cultivation foundation. With that, how many aristocrats, prestigious clans, generals, and factions would be reshuffled? However, no matter what the outcome was, Fang Xinjian would become the entire desert's nightmare. In the sky, the Sacred Fire Order's patriarch continued to stand stiffly on the spot, his eyes filled with shock and doubt. Cutting off the system was something so unbelievable that he could not be sure if what he had seen was an illusion or reality. Chapter 808. Fang Xinjian left the Sand Country directly. It was naturally because time was tight for him, and he did not have that much free time to waste on the Sacred Fire Order's patriarch. The evil god ritual in the imperial capital was still ongoing, and the first prince was still on the run. Alexander, the fifth prince, and true Lord Qinshan, who had surrounded him earlier, had all been killed by him. Only the first prince was still on the run. However, most of the first prince's powers had been crushed by Fang Xinjian in the northern ice region. He was only left with less than 5% of his powers to flee. Earlier, Fang Xinjian's sudden inspiration had suddenly lost all senses of the first prince. With a flash, he arrived in the sky above the imperial capital. Fang Xinjian understood that the first prince must have left this world to be able to make him lose his senses from his sudden inspiration. And the greatest possibility of him leaving the world was that he had come to the evil god ritual. Looking at the imperial capital, which was encompassed by purple light pillars, Fang Xinjian's eyes narrowed slightly. I've finally come here. However, at the next moment, he suddenly fell into a daze. B*****. Your mother is really shameless. Everyone beat him to death. In the bottomless green forest, more than 10 children surrounded another child and cursed angrily. Their expressions were twisted, and there was a cruel and innocent smile on their faces. From time to time, they would throw stones and hit the other child until his head was covered in blood. The scene before him appeared and then disappeared instantly. Fang Xinjian was stunned for a moment. That's me? But why don't I remember such a thing happening in the past? In his memories, he had merely attended an ordinary school, and the classmates around him were all very ordinary as well. Everyone went to school normally, took exams normally, and graduated normally. There had not even been a single special accident, let alone something like this. Shaking his head, Fang Xinjian thought, what on earth did that purple mage king do to me? It seems that not only have my emotions returned, but something else has also returned as well? But now isn't the time to be thinking about these things. At the thought of this, Fang Xinjian took a step forward and headed toward the evil god ritual. Before Fang Xinjian entered the ritual, the first prince had already escaped into the evil god ritual. His entire body was illusory like a ghost, appearing and disappearing from time to time. Clearly, because his power was too unstable, there was something wrong with his existence. At this moment, the eldest prince could be said to have never been in such a dangerous situation in his life. Almost as soon as he stepped into the ceremony, he shuttled through the alleys and approached the center of the imperial capital at an extremely fast speed. Humph, since Fang Xinjian has defeated me, it means that the ambush has failed. At the thought of this, the first prince's eyes were filled with an intense unwillingness to accept this outcome. However, although he was unwilling, he knew that it was no longer possible for him to rely on his own powers to defeat Fang Xinjian. Fang Xinjian has the sudden inspiration ability. No matter where I run to, I won't be able to escape from him. My only chance of survival is in this evil god ritual. This place is isolated from the world, and he won't be able to sense me for now. Moreover, the guardian kings of the Holy Sea of Truth and the 4 mage kings are all existences who can deal with Fang Xinjian. Only by borrowing their powers will I have a chance to seek revenge. At the thought of this, his speed increased. He was like a meteor phantom, instantly killing his way to the center of the imperial capital. Then his body moved up and down, changing his appearance so that others would not be able to recognize him. After all, he was a divine-level expert. Even though a large part of his powers had been destroyed by Fang Xinjian, his realm was still there. He could also move at akin to light speed. In the blink of an eye, he darted into the center of the imperial capital and was sent into the White Jade Square. Right now, the 2 guardian kings, Death-revealing heavenly eyes and darkness aberration, were standing together in the White Jade Square. Streams of sword light flashed to and fro before them, but they were unable to break through death-revealing heavenly eyes' blockade. Sword light continued to move about at light speed, but wherever death-revealing heavenly eyes' vision passed by, everything in the world would be destroyed. Moreover, his vision could cover an area of 120 degrees. As long as he turned slightly, he would be able to see 360 degrees without any blind spot. Since he also had the ability to move at light speed, he had an advantage over Fang Xinjian. The sword light attacked consecutively several times, but death-revealing heavenly eyes managed to break through all of them. With each glance, a large part of the sword light would shatter, clearly suffering from serious injuries. Fang Xinjian was fighting against death-revealing heavenly eyes incessantly, but he was unable to gain the upper hand and was even being completely suppressed. As the ritual was independent of the world, Fang Xinjian was completely unaware of what was happening outside. Not far away, under the blood-colored vortex, the Gold Mage King continued to stand there with a smile, his eyes flashing with an unfathomable glow. As the first prince had changed his appearance after he entered, people only took a glance at him and then paid him no more attention. It was because everyone's gazes and attention were focused on the 2 guardian kings and Fang Xinjian. In another direction, Charlot looked at the battle situation in the sky anxiously. Although his memories had been forged by the chaos which and the Gold Mage King, the forged emotions were still emotions. Right now, he was naturally very worried about Fang Xinjian's safety. One of the Guardian Kings has already suppressed Teacher completely. If the other Guardian King were to make a move as well. At the thought of this, Charlot's countenance turned even grimmer. Although he had long known that the Guardian Kings from the Holy Sea of Truth were very strong, when he saw that Fang Xinjian, who had always been undefeatable, was being suppressed so easily by death-revealing heavenly eyes, Charlot's mood turned extremely grim. This won't do. Yushan looked at the battle situation in the sky. Right now, the attention of this conferred knight, who had been tricked by Charlot, was also attracted by the rarely seen battle in the sky. With his heavens perception, he was able to somewhat understand the situation in the battlefield. Fang Xinjian is no longer able to attack the Guardian Kings, and each of the Guardian King's glances is enough to cause him serious injuries. Right now, he's barely holding on and probably won't be able to hold on for much longer. Yushan sighed and said, "The Guardian King's divine arts are too terrifying. As long as it's within his line of sight, he can destroy it at will. There's even no telling how far away it is. This is even more terrifying in this space." Earlier, Fang Xinjian's sword light instantly became a small dot, probably reaching the boundaries of this space. However, he was still dealt serious injuries by the Guardian King's glances. As long as he's trapped in this space, there's nothing here, no obstacles, and he's unable to move or dodge for a long distance. Even Fang Xinjian has no chance of winning. Hearing that, the worry in Charlot's eyes grew even stronger. Yu Xianru also felt the same way. However, Fang Xinjian was someone from the empire after all. When she heard what her father said, she could not help but ask, "Father, can we help him?" "Help him?" Yu Shan let out a bitter laugh. "We don't even have the right to speak here. Moreover, he's the one who asked for this. To think that he would even dare to attack the Holy See of Truth's guardian kings with his sword arts." Charlot, who was at the side, said unwillingly, "The guardian kings were the ones who attacked first. So what?" Yu Shan said slowly, "The Holy See of Truth is the strongest influence in the world. Facing such an opponent, the only way out is to surrender." At the moment he resisted, not only did he bring harm to himself, but he also brought harm to his subordinates, family, disciples, and us. Do you think that the Guardian Kings will be satisfied after killing him? The Holy See of Truth loves to kill people consecutively. Hearing Yu Shan's words, the countenances of Charlot, Yu Shan's daughter Yu Xianru, and Yu Shan's disciple Clade changed, turning extremely grim. Chapter 809. They were the number one influence in the world, the strongest organization in the world. Such a reputation had always been filled with bloodshed and killing intent. They had killed their way through time and time again. The piles of white bones under the Holy See of Truth were the corpses of countless experts that proved how powerful they were. Over the countless years, the Guardian Kings and Divine Arts Knights of the Holy See of Truth had killed countless so-called heretics. If a heretic were to be discovered in a village, the entire village would be purified, and several hundred or even several thousand people would be burned to death. If a mage were to be discovered in a tribe, the entire tribe would be captured and killed. It could be said that it was rare to see mages and members of other religious factions in the entire Papal States and the Northern Plains. If not for the existence of the Mage Association, the people from the Church would have long since marched down to the south and uprooted the Sacred Fire Order in the Sand Country. Even now, many of the experts in the Empire still understood how terrifying the Holy See of Truth was. This was even more so for Deputy Governor Yu Shan. He understood clearly that regardless of what conflicts there were between Fang Xinjian and the Holy See of Truth, as Fang Xinjian's companions, they would definitely be dealt with by the Holy See of Truth in the future. These Guardian Kings were unreasonable when it came to killing people. Yu Xianru revealed a worried expression and said, "It can't be, Father. They only came in with them. If we explain things to them properly, they won't kill us, right?" Yu Shan smiled coldly and said, "Do the Church really need a reason to kill? 150 years ago, the Steel Lion Kingdom was not the only one in the Northern Plains. It was because the Golden Eagle tribe's Prince Swishian had befriended a mage that the 400,000 members of the Golden Eagle tribe were all killed. They were slaughtered like cattle and sheep, and their blood dyed the entire plains red. Even all the shamans in the plains were massacred, and the Holy See of Truth was the only sect left in the Northern Plains. Therefore, the Steel Lion Kingdom is now the one in charge in the Northern Plains." After talking about this part of history, Yu Xianru shut her mouth. However, Clade said unwillingly, "Could it be that we can only wait for death?" Yu Shan sighed, "Unless Fang Xinjian is able to defeat him." Hearing Yu Shan's reply, both Yu Xianru and Clade despaired. Right now, Fang Xinjian could not even defeat a guardian emperor, let alone two of them. Amidst the crowd, the first prince, who was looking at the situation of the battle, was also extremely satisfied. There was an excited smile in his eyes. As expected of the Holy See of Truth, the strongest force on the continent, any two law emperors would be able to easily suppress Fang Xinjian. Thinking of this, The corners of the first prince's lips curled up into a smile. This way, even if Feng Xinjian were to rush over, he wouldn't be a match for these two guardian kings. At the thought of this, the first prince suddenly could not wait to see Feng Xinjian rush over. Just the thought of being able to witness Feng Xinjian being suppressed and killed by the guardian kings made the first prince feel great. It was because he had been suppressed by Feng Xinjian for far too long. Ever since the Hades vault, Feng Xinjian had become stronger and more terrifying each time they met. Feng Xinjian would defeat the first prince completely every time. It was as if there was an endless stretch of dark clouds hanging over the first prince's head, causing him to be unable to see any light or hope. Just then, a stream of sword light appeared in the air. The moment it entered, it merged with another stream of sword light, becoming one. In that instant, the two streams of sword light merged into one, and waves of world-shaking auras that seemed as if they were going to fill up the entire world burst forth. Wave after wave of strong gales swept out across the white jade square. Countless people looked at the two streams of sword light that were intersecting in the sky, and all of them revealed astonished expressions. It was Feng Xinjian, who had rushed over from the outside, finally arriving in the square. The moment he merged with 50% of the powers here, waves of information and emotions kept on intersecting between the two. As he was no longer in the same timeline and universe as Miracle World, Feng Xinjian, who was in the White Jade Square, was not affected by the Purple Mage King in the outside world. However, this time around, when 50% of Feng Xinjian from the outside world came here, he also brought along a tremendous amount of information. Grief, fury, joy, and all sorts of emotions exploded in Feng Xinjian's heart. The veil of a new realm at the microscopic level was lifted before him. His eyes pierced through layers of space, as if seeing through the entire microscopic world. He saw countless waves, microscopic particles, and countless indescribable phenomena. Many scenes of light and shadows appeared before him, as if forming countless scenes. In a luxurious and spacious bedroom, a child was being carried by a middle-aged woman. The child's head was still wrapped in white bandages. His black eyes were wide open as he looked at the middle-aged woman and asked, "Grandmother, what kind of person is my mother?" The middle-aged woman touched the boy's face pitifully and said, "Your mother is the greatest genius in this world, an unrivaled hero. As for the thoughts of those ants, there's no need for you to care." The boy continued to ask, "Then can we kill all of them?" The middle-aged woman's gaze froze slightly, and she seemed to unconsciously move away from the boy by a few inches. Her eyes were filled with wariness as she asked, "Why would you think that?" The boy laughed and said, "I'm just joking." The many scenes of light and shadows came and went very quickly. In the blink of an eye, they disappeared from Feng Xinjian's mind. It was as if he had suddenly recalled his memories and the past. However, Feng Xinjian was at a loss regarding the scenes in his mind. However, this brief moment where he was in a slight daze had been too long for the two guardian kings present. It was sufficient for them to do many things. Right now, Feng Xinjian had merged into one, and he was carrying the three divine swords, Abyss, Thunder Calamity, and Panway. His powers were world-shaking, and even the two guardian kings felt apprehensive at the sight of this situation. What a guy! To think that he didn't use his full powers earlier? As expected of a guy who blasphemes the god. Attack together. In an instant, Darkness Aberration, who had been staying at the side to guard against the Gold Mage King, also made a move. This guardian king, who had come to the Empire together with death-revealing heavenly eyes, also performed a powerful divine art right off the bat. Darkness Aberration was different from death-revealing heavenly eyes' absolute offensive prowess. What he brought was a type of absolute defense. He was able to create an unknown black substance that seemed to be able to neutralize all attacks that were triggered from electromagnetic forces, gravitational forces, strong forces, and weak forces. This meant that this substance was almost indestructible, and the various weapons and defensive equipment he formed all possessed an almost invincible defense. Therefore, at the instant darkness aberration made his move, layers of black lumps sealed up Feng Xinjian. They were like pieces of curtains that gradually formed a black sphere. However, the greatest weakness of darkness aberration's ability was that its formation speed was too slow. Compared to the attacks of divine-level experts, their formation speed required over 1/10 of a second. It was far too slow. If it were any other time, Feng Xinjian would be able to dodge this attack with a single thought. However, he was in a daze. Therefore, in the instant that he was in a daze, darkness aberration had already encompassed Feng Xinjian in an unknown dark substance, forming a black sphere with a diameter of about 3 meters. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.